Chapter 443. A white cloud was flying leisurely towards Anhe City. On top of the cloud, Eugene stood carefully behind Wu Qi with his back hunched. He stared at Wu Qi for some time, and at last, he could no longer hold back the doubts in his mind. Lowering his voice, he asked, "Senior, are we just going to let this matter go?" Wu Qi was thinking about something with his eyes narrowed, something that happened a long time ago. There seemed to be a piece of black land flashing before his eyes, and a broad and warm hand was grabbing his hand, while a pale and powerless hand was rubbing his messy hair. When did that happen? That day, he was fighting something with all his might? Upon hearing Eugene's question, Wu Qi asked reflexively, What is it?" Eugene shivered, but he still plucked up his courage and asked, "Is it about Reverend Hidden Heart and Reverend Guarding Heart?" In the past few days, Eugene and Hidden Heart had formed a close friendship with each other. Eugene was born in Green Pill Sect, a sect that devoted itself to concocting medicine. He also had a compassionate frame of mind like a doctor, which made him a perfect match for Hidden Heart and his disciple, who were fond of building pagodas. This time, it was Eugene who accompanied Hidden Heart and his disciple to Greenwood Mountain to gather medicinal herbs. Taoist Yunzong had killed both of them with a single sword strike, and it was impossible for Eugene to not have any thoughts about it. The more honest a man was, the more fearful he would be when he was stubborn. Eugene was usually very afraid of Wu Qi, but because of the matter between Hidden Heart and his disciple, he clenched his teeth and asked, "Reverend Hidden Heart and Reverend Guarding Heart are both good people. Are you going to let this matter go?" This time, Wu Qi heard Eugene's question clearly. With his hands clasped behind his back, he narrowed his eyes and stared at the looming Anhe City in front of him. Suddenly, he chuckled and said, "How can you calculate everything in the world? Eugene, have you ever heard of Green City?" Eugene opened his mouth, but did not say anything. He had never heard of Xianyang Qingqing. The founding ancestral master of Green Pill Sect had found an opportunity to cultivate immortality from some passing immortal, and was lucky enough to build such a foundation. The disciples of Green Pill Sect had never left Pangu continent, and they did not even know what was going on in outer heavenly realms. How could they know anything about Xianyang and Green City? Wu Qi sighed and said, "Green City of Xianyang is the strongest immortal sect in Xianyang heavenly realm. Its founding ancestral master inherited the legacy of an ancient immortal, and currently possesses the cultivation base of a third-tier gold immortal." Cold sweat immediately dripped from Eugene's forehead. Third-grade golden immortal? A golden immortal was already a legendary figure, let alone a third-tier golden immortal who was considered to be one of the top figures in the pyramid. Since Taoist Yunzong came from such a sect, what else could he say? Gloomily, Eugene bowed his head and breathed out a soundless sigh. It looked like there was no way to avenge Hidden Heart. However, what did Wu Qi's first sentence mean? How can the matters of the world be calculated clearly? So, was he going to calculate it or not? Eugene's expression flickered as he stared blankly at Wu Qi's back. Suddenly, Wu Qi turned and gave Eugene a look. After a brief moment of pondering, he fished out a small silk booklet from under his sleeve and threw it over to Eugene. "Study it carefully. There is a cultivation technique in it, which is much stronger than the one in Green Pill Sect. If you cultivate this cultivation technique, you will be able to form your nascent soul in about 100 years. There are also some pill concocting techniques and some pill formulas for lower-grade spirit pills. If you can have some attainments in pill concoction, perhaps you will be able to form your nascent soul in less than 100 years. Over the years, Wu Qi had killed many people and plundered their belongings. He had killed many heaven immortals, and there were even more nascent soul and nascent divinity cultivators. Therefore, it was reasonable for him to choose some decent cultivation techniques from them. Eugene was a good man. Apart from being a little timid, his temperament suited Wu Qi's taste. Therefore, he gave Eugene a cultivation technique that was slightly above average, and the pill concocting technique was the basic pill concocting technique of White Cloud Immortal Sect. Although it was just a basic pill concocting technique, it was at least 10 times better than the pill concocting technique of Green Pill Sect, which had an unknown origin. Eugene took over the silk booklet and gave it a quick flip. Immediately, his eyes lit up. The energy concocting technique recorded in the silk booklet was extremely exquisite. It described a variety of techniques to gather energy into one's body, which was at least a few times more complicated than the ultimate technique of green pill sect. The pill formulas recorded at the back were even more exquisite, making Eugene feel as if his vision had been broadened. Although he had only skimmed through the silk booklet, he immediately felt his mind lighten up, as if there was an indescribable enlightenment flowing down from his head. His Jin Dan began to pound abruptly, and the natural energies around him began to flow into his body. Right at this moment, Wu Qi said in a low voice, "You should keep the heart-concealing and heart-guarding matters in your heart. Don't show it in front of Taoist Yunzong, or I might not be able to protect you. Don't meet him in the future. Just focus on your work in Anhe City, and you will be in charge of all the medicine shops under Euphoria Heavenly Palace." Eugene's mind raced. Could it be that Wu Qi was afraid that Taoist Yunzong would find out something by forbidding him from meeting Taoist Yunzong? His eyes turned warm and he bowed and said, "You are right, senior. From now on, Eugene will stay in the city and not leave." Wu Qi answered softly, then began to count on his fingers. He could not enter Yuxiong Plain, as any immortal cultivator who entered would surely die. Even a primordial immortal had been killed, so Wu Qi dared not to try his luck. That being the case, there was no way he could go to the place mentioned in Scroll of Stealing that produced the innate yang energy in Yuxiong Plain. Now, there was only one option left for Wu Qi, and that was to find the trace of innate yang energy produced in the land of 7E Negate Yang, located at the bottom of the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, according to the Scroll of Stealing. But where was the Great Desolation Valley? How was he going to get there? Without the map, it was a tricky problem. In the map sold to Wu Qi by the blind old man, there was no mention of the Great Desolation Valley. Anhe City was just a small place on Pangu continent, and the cultivators here had never seen the outside world. Therefore, it was impossible for Wu Qi to get any information from them. Wu Qi felt a headache coming on. Perhaps he could only place his hope on Reverend Li Yang. The white cloud drifted lightly and came to the sky above Anhe City. As Wu Qi was about to descend into the city lord mansion with his divine will, he suddenly discovered a commotion in a residence in the southeast corner of the city. A few women were running out of the residence in panic, and two of them had their hands stained with blood and filth. Meanwhile, a few men in the courtyard had drawn their blades and swords angrily and were about to rush into the house. One of them was shouting, "Kill this monster! Our family is in trouble! Kill this monster!" Monster? Wu Qi scanned the house with his divine will, and a faint Buddhist light flashed across it immediately. On a large bed in the room, a pregnant woman, who had just given birth, was crying and curling up in a corner of the bed. In the middle of the bed, a baby, whose body was entirely red and whose umbilical cord was still intact, was sitting on the bed with his legs crossed. Both of his hands were locked into a mudra, and his little mouth was murmuring something. The baby had an ugly face, and his head was covered with mottled scars that looked like scars. A white pearl the size of a chicken was embedded in the center of his forehead, emitting a faint glow. However, the surface of the pearl was covered with cracks, and a few of them had gone through it. It looked like it would break at any time. A few men rushed into the delivery room with swords and blades in their hands, roaring as they swung their weapons and hacked at the baby. With a blink of his body, Wu Qi brought Eugene and rushed into the delivery room. With a backhand slap, the blades and swords held in the hands of a few men were broken, and the tremendous force knocked them off their feet, causing them to stagger and roll away. Wu Qi stood before the window, looking down at the little baby. Suddenly, he asked in a soft voice, "Little monk, do you still remember me?" The naked baby raised his head and gave Wu Qi a glance. Suddenly, his eyes went wide, and he began to yell at Wu Qi. Two streams of warm tears rolled down from the corners of his eyes. He struggled to his feet and crawled toward Wu Qi while trembling. But, as a newborn baby, his limbs were weak, and he only managed to crawl a few times before he lay down on the bed and could no longer move. Wu Qi did not have time to care about the filth on the baby's body that had not been washed clean. With one swift movement, he carried the baby up and laughed aloud. Excellent. And here I thought I owed you for saving my life. You died this morning, but in the afternoon, you have already reincarnated into the mortal world, and you are even in his city. This is the fate between us. Slapping the baby's butt, Wu Qi suddenly frowned and said, That's right. Strange. How did you reincarnate so fast? Senior, cried Eugene hastily, as long as they are Buddhist cultivators, they always reincarnate very quickly. In the past, there were a few cases where Buddhist disciples died in battles with others. As long as their souls were not destroyed, they would be reincarnated very quickly, and usually they would be reincarnated in the vicinity of Anhi city. Not only in Anhi city, it is the same in every place where there are Buddhist disciples. Eugene clicked his tongue and murmured under his breath. All the fellow Taoists said that the 6 paths of reincarnation in the 9 underworlds are created by Buddhist cultivators, and that is why they can have such a convenient time. The 6 paths of reincarnation were created by Buddhist cultivators? Wu Qi shook his head disapprovingly. The 6 paths of reincarnation was a Tao formed naturally by the heaven and earth. Who could control it? Who dared to control it? However, he was one of the reasons why Buddhist cultivators were able to reincarnate so quickly. Hefting the baby in his arms, Wu Qi turned to look at the woman lying on the bed, who was struck dumb, and asked, What is the surname of the master of this house? The woman was struck dumb with fear as well. When Wu Qi asked her, she quickly answered, My master's surname is Zhu. Zhu. Suddenly, Wu Qi roared with laughter. Slapping the baby's buttocks, he thrust the sword of greedy wolf out and cut off the umbilical cord of the baby. Delighted, Wu Qi said, Wonderful! Guarding Heart, oh Guarding Heart, your Buddhist name in the past is really unpleasant to hear. From today onwards, you are Zhu Beiji, the monk Beiji. From now on, I will be your master, and I will definitely teach you all the Buddhist scriptures in Golden Pavilion Temple, so that you will be a monk in your previous life, a monk in this life, and forever a monk in all your lives. Eugene twitched his lips. Why did Senior Greed's words always sound so strange? Nevertheless, it was a good thing that Guarding Heart was reincarnated. But what about Hidden Heart? Eugene stared blankly at the shattered relic between Guarding Heart, Beiji's brows. He was at a loss for words. Right at this moment, a furious roar was heard coming from outside the room. Get the hell out of here now, you evil man! Don't you dare hurt my wife! Wu Qi turned his head and looked over his shoulder. He saw a troop of 50 soldiers, who were sent flying by him just now. They had drawn their bows and aimed at the delivery room. Chapter 444. An official? What official are you? Wu Qi walked out of the room with Beiji in his arms, throwing a cold glance at the young man standing in front of the crowd and scolding him. The young man was tall and burly, and there was an aura of someone who had been through many battlefields in his eyes and brows. Upon seeing Wu Qi's reaction, the man clenched his jaws and said, I'm Zhu Linggong, the garrison guard of Anhi City in Anlu County. Garrison guard? What was this official position? The information related to the human race that Wu Qi obtained from Yu Huan through interrogation did not mention this official position. Eugene quickly stepped forward and said, Zhu Linggong is General Zhu. His clan used to be the county governor of Anlu County, and they have been guarding Anlu County for nearly 1,000 generations. However, when Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Jade Pagoda Temple established their sects near Anhi City, many immortal sects of various sizes were following them. As a result, the Zhu clan failed to guard the city well, allowing other immortal sects to gain a foothold in Anhi City. Therefore, the human emperor issued an imperial decree, exiling the entire Zhu clan. Pointing at Zhu Linggong, Eugene continued in a low voice. Zhu Linggong's clan is the last branch of the Zhu clan who stayed in Anhi City. That is to say, at least Anhi City is still the territory of the human emperor, but in fact they do not have any real power. All the previous city lords have never taken the Zhu clan seriously. This Zhu Linggong, Eugene laughed and did not comment further. However, when Wu Qi spread out his divine will, he discovered that Zhu Linggong's mansion, including the 50 soldiers standing in front of him, only had a total of about 100 people. It was just an ordinary mansion in Anhui City. Zhu Lingong did have a beast soul living in his body, but too bad, its quality was not as good as the beast soul of the wind-breaking wolf of Great Yan's scouting office. Zhu Lingong's overall strength was only at mid-stage Xiantian realm, and the rest of the soldiers were so weak that Wu Qi did not want to comment on them. With a casual point of his finger, all 50 strong bows in the soldiers' hands suddenly turned into powder, and the tension of the bowstrings disappeared abruptly. The 50 soldiers lost control of their arms, causing them to lose their balance. Their arms that were controlling the bowstrings were flung backward, and their bodies spun a few times before falling to the ground in a sorry state. From his sleeve, Wu Qi took out a storage bag and threw it over to the dumbfounded Zhu Lingong. With an indifferent tone, he said, "Let's form a good relationship. This isn't a monster. This is your biological son. It's just that as soon as he was born, he was possessed by this poor Taoist disciple, Beiji, and reincarnated into this world. This is your flesh and blood, and also my disciple. This is the fate between you and me. If you have any problems in the future, come and find me." Pointing at his own nose, Wu Qi said, "I'm the one who has the final say in Euphoria Heavenly Palace now, and I should be the one who has the final say in the area 1 million miles around Anhui City. So, haha, do you have anything that I like?" Throwing his head back and laughing out loud, Wu Qi carried the squealing Beiji out of the courtyard. It never took much effort to talk to smart people. Zhu Lingong stared blankly for a while, then hurriedly turned around and chased after him. He grabbed Wu Qi's sleeve and said in a low voice, "Immortal Master, you are fated to meet Duke Ling's beloved son. This is Duke Ling's fortune. Now that Duke Ling has prepared a banquet, please, please." Wu Qi laughed, then lightly patted Zhu Lingong's shoulder and said, "Come and find me after you've made up your mind. There are gold, silver, jewelry, and all sorts of spirit herbs in that storage bag. Your wife is suffering from a great shock after giving birth, so please use these spirit herbs to nurse her back to health. Remember, come and find me after you've made up your mind." With a flick of his sleeve, Wu Qi pushed Zhu Lingong tens of steps back. While laughing, he brought Eugene and returned to the City Lord Mansion. Upon stepping through the main entrance of the City Lord Mansion, Wu Qi casually threw Beiji into Eugene's arms and said, "Eugene, you are fated to meet this kid. Before he can walk and talk on his own, just let him follow you. If you know any Buddhist scriptures, you can read a few of them to him every day." After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi said with a strange voice, "As a monk, you must look like a monk, and you must have the awareness of being a monk. From today onwards, don't feed him even a single mouthful of milk. Just feed him some fruit juice. Also, as a monk, get a few servants to serve him when he takes a bath and changes his clothes. Don't let him get close to women since he was young. Since he has become a monk, he must be a pure monk." Eugene had just received Beiji when he suddenly heard Wu Qi's order. His hands trembled, and he nearly threw Beiji away. "TSK, a newborn baby doesn't even drink a single mouthful of milk? That's a little too pitiful." Lowering his head to look at Beiji, he saw that the little fellow had a conflicted expression as well. His little face was contorted, and he was glaring fiercely at Wu Qi. Wu Qi chuckled evilly, then removed the string of beads formed from 18 fleshly body sariras he had fused with his transcendence energy, then carefully placed it around Beiji's neck. He said in a deep voice, "Little monk, you sure have reincarnated. It looks like your Shifu's soul has perished in order to protect you. This is the essence condensed from your Shifu and your fleshly body sariras. Start absorbing it when you are young. It will save you at least several hundred years of hard work." Beiji held the string of beads tightly with both hands, and 2 streams of warm tears rolled down from the corners of his eyes. Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then looked at Beiji and said, "Work harder and grow faster. If you can reach the cultivation base of your Shifu's previous life, I'll give you a chance to kill Taoist Yunzong with your own hands." I can't believe Lao Tzu has taken a monk as his disciple." Feeling a little awkward in his heart, Wu Qi twitched his lips and pinched Beiji's cheek, then walked into the backyard of the City Lord Mansion leisurely. Madman Shui walked over slowly from the gatehouse, chewing on a piece of braised meat. He came before Eugene and gave Beiji a few glances, then said with a crooked smile, "This little fellow is a few times uglier than Lao Tzu. Do you want to eat meat? Do you want to eat meat? If you don't talk, I'll think you want to eat meat." Before Eugene could say anything to stop him, Madman Shui pulled off the fattest and greasy piece of meat from the braised meat and shoved it into Beiji's mouth. How could the poor Beiji have the strength to resist Madman Shui, whose cultivation base had improved greatly? He rolled his eyes, straightened his neck, and finally swallowed the piece of fat meat into his stomach. While Madman Shui was torturing Beiji, Lao Ai strode out from a side room, surrounded by a few beautiful female cultivators. Seeing Madman Shui forcing the braised meat into Beiji's mouth, Lao Ai curiously came to Beiji's side. He reached out his hand and flicked the little bird on his crotch, which had a sharp horn protruding out of it. "Tsk, this little fellow is interesting. Although he has just been born, he actually has the foundation of the indestructible body of the Buddhist League. With a body like this, if he were to cultivate the Great Sun technique from a young age, I suppose it would be very effective, right? Eugene, where did you get this little fellow? Why does he look so ugly?" Eugene's face scrunched up, and he nearly burst into tears. While Madman Shui was forcing the braised meat into Bajie's mouth, a few beautiful female cultivators had already rushed up to him while giggling and were groping Bajie's body in a flurry. They paid special attention to his tiny little bird. A pure monk? Eugene felt like weeping but had no tears as he stared at Beiji, who had his eyes rolled back and was nearly stuffed to death. "In your next life? Why don't I just strangle you to death right now, and Great Master Guarding Heart, can you reincarnate again?" Lao Ai and Madman Shui, who were stationed in Anhe City, had obtained a novel toy. They snatched the custody of Beiji from Eugene's hand and began to carry out a cultivation plan named Joyful Monk Breeding, according to their plan. It was needless to say how much suffering Beiji would have to go through in the hands of these two villains. All sorts of strange and bizarre things had completely overturned the worldview and view of life he had in his previous life, making him feel like he was living in hell. But Wu Qi had no time to save him. While Beiji was in a miserable state, Wu Qi had already returned to Greenwood Mountain with 30,000 laborers. The entrance of Greenwood Mountain, which was split open by Wu Qi with a single sword strike, was now leveled into a flat land measuring 100 acres in circumference. 9 jade archways were erected in front and behind, each of which was twice as tall and magnificent as the one in front of them. Wu Qi had invited all the most famous stone-carving masters around Anhe City, asking them to design the most gorgeous patterns and use the brilliant jade of the best quality that could glow at night to polish and process them. He had strived to make the 9 memorial archways look magnificent and flawless. On both sides of the archways were green pines and cypresses that were transplanted from the depths of the mountains. Each of them was a huge tree so thick that it would take a dozen people to wrap their arms around it. The shade of the trees formed a green cloud that stretched from the entrance of Greenwood Mountain all the way to the valley 100 miles deep inside the mountain. Between the huge trees and under the archways was a tunnel paved with golden bricks. It measured 60 feet wide and was paved with pure golden bricks. The surface of the bricks was polished so smooth that not even a strand of hair could fit through them. Every brick was carved with fine patterns, and when all the patterns were joined together, they formed a huge pattern of a cloud dragon on the tunnel. The dragon's head was under the first archway, and the dragon's tail stretched into the valley 100 miles away. Under the ingenious design of Wu Qi, the valley of Greenwood Mountain had changed its appearance as well. The valley stretched 100 miles long, and the widest part was over 20 miles wide. From the entrance all the way to the bottom of the valley, a total of 18 magnificent palaces were built, each taller and more majestic than the last. They were built with golden bricks and emerald tiles, silver ingots as the walls, and jade bricks as the floor. Not a single trace of soil could be seen on the green grassland between the palaces. Underneath the fine green grass was the emerald sand carefully ground by expert craftsmen using stone mills. At first glance, one could see nothing but greenery. The greenery made one's heart feel refreshed, and a refreshing aura filled the air. Between the palaces were decorated with countless strange stones and trees, as well as all kinds of exotic flowers and herbs. The huge palaces were connected by a cloud bridge that hovered 1,000 feet above the ground. On top of the cloud bridge, exquisite pavilions made from fine jade were seen hovering. Every place, every step, every glance, everything he saw was a peerlessly ingenious idea, a boundless, wondrous realm. He had emptied the storehouses of Euphoria Heavenly Palace, Jade Pagoda Temple and Golden Pavilion Temple, as well as those left behind by other powers of various sizes. Only then was he able to gather all the precious materials and build such a luxurious Taoist Rite Temple. Fortunately, Taoist Yunzong had 8 disciples, each of whom possessed the cultivation base of heaven immortals. With their full help, as well as the hard work of 30,000 laborers who had a slight cultivation base, the splendid and beautiful Taoist Rite Temple finally took shape in 3 months. When the main building was completed, all that was left were pots and pans, cloud beds, chairs, candlesticks, incense burners, murals, and many other decorations. All of these could be found in Euphoria Heavenly Palace, Jade Pagoda Temple, and Golden Pavilion Temple. Wu Qi had emptied all the decorations in those palaces, then selected the most luxurious ones to fill the Taoist Rite Temple. Finally, the Taoist Rite Temple was decorated beautifully, and no one could find anything wrong with it. Then, after Wu Qi's suggestion, Taoist Yunzong wrote the words Green City Mansion on the 9 memorial archways with his own hands, then used some expert craftsmen to carve them into horizontal boards. With that, the Taoist Rite Temple was officially completed. Over the past 3 months, Wu Qi had been working day and night to build the Taoist Rite Temple. Taoist Yunzong had seen it with his own eyes, and remembered it in his heart. As a result, his favorable impression toward Wu Qi was completely indescribable. If not for the help of Wu Qi, a local tyrant, Taoist Yunzong would not have been able to come here with 8 disciples and 4 Taoist apprentices. He was so poor that he even planned to rob a cave abode to stay temporarily. How could he have expected that in just 3 months, there would be such a splendid Taoist Rite Temple waiting for him to preside over? Hovering in midair, Taoist Yunzong looked down at the glittering Taoist Rite Temple with a great mood. He could not help but sigh contentedly. Wu Qi, who had been busy for 3 months, came before Taoist Yunzong, bowed and said, "Senior Immortal, is it time for us to send out invitations and invite our fellow Taoists to attend the opening ceremony?" Taoist Yunzong raised his brows, stuck out his chest, and said with a loud laugh, "Of course." Therefore, Wu Qi smiled and did not say anything, stepping aside. Chapter 445. Accompanying Taoist Yunzong, Wu Qi took a stroll in Green City Mansion. The scenery was beautiful everywhere, and the scenery changed with every step they took. In order to design this Taoist Rite Temple, Wu Qi had brought out all the advantages of the gardens in Jiangnan that Lu Xiaobai had designed in his memory. To describe it with an inappropriate phrase, it was truly a thrilling journey, and every step they took gave people a different feeling. Taoist Yunzang's face was flushed, and he was emitting a faint glow. Under Wu Qi's guidance, he was touring around the mansion in a relaxed and happy mood. It was so beautiful that no words could describe it. The magnificence, and extravagance of this Taoist Rite Temple was 100 times beyond Taoist Yunzang's expectation. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that with the help of Wu Qi, he could actually manage such a Taoist Rite Temple in just 3 short months. The furnishings in the palaces and pavilions, the beds, the benches, the tables, and even the writing brushes, pen holders, paperweights, bookmarks, and even the axes used to chop firewood in the kitchen, were all exquisite and time-honored items that were crafted with many precious materials. Among them, the various items looted from Euphoria Heavenly Palace were even more precious. They were dazzling, and this was the best way to describe them. Euphoria Heavenly Palace was a sect of the Evil League, and it mainly practiced dual cultivation techniques. On top of that, Lady Qiao was a lady with a temperament of extravagance. Therefore, the furnishings in the palace were all extremely luxurious. For example, The cloud bed placed on the dais in the first great hall of Green City Mansion was carved out from a piece of purple jade essence, measuring over 100 feet in circumference. At its core was a piece of Purple Palace Divine Jade Essence, which could condense energy and nourish one's life force, and was extremely beneficial to the immortal soul of an immortal cultivator. That piece of Purple Mansion Divine Jade Essence was about 10 feet in size, and there was a piece of the same size in Green City. However, it had been cut into over 20 hassocks, which were distributed to a dozen elders and a few core disciples of Green City. How could it be compared to Euphoria Heavenly Palace, which carved it into a cloud bed for them to use? Furthermore, he was being ordered around by only one person. By offering this piece of Purple Palace Divine Jade Essence to the elders of Green City, it would be a great merit, and Taoist Yunzong would be rewarded handsomely with cultivation techniques, immortal pills, immortal items, and many other things. And in the 18 palaces and pavilions of this Qingqing villa, there were many such rare items. From this, it could be seen that Pangu continent was rich in natural resources, and that Euphoria Heavenly Palace and the other sects had reaped a great harvest after entering Pangu continent. Taoist Yunzong pinched his fingers and did a quick calculation in his mind. If he were to work hard and manage the business step by step, it would take him at least several periods of time. And now, with Wu Qi's help, he had accumulated such a large fortune in just 3 months. Taoist Yunzang's hands, feet, and heart were trembling. He began to look forward to the reward he would receive after he presented this Taoist right temple to the seniors of his sect. At the same time, from the disdain he had for Wu Qi in the beginning, it was soon replaced by admiration, and then gratitude. Now, he even began to regard Wu Qi as his best friend. Of course, Taoist Yunzong knew that Wu Qi had done all this for the sake of Green City behind him. Even so, Wu Qi had done him a great favor, so great that Taoist Yunzong was too embarrassed to say that he would take Wu Qi as his disciple. In his opinion, Wu Qi was a reasonable and capable man, and he should recommend him to his master. Taoist Yunzong had his own plan as well. If he took Wu Qi as his disciple, he would have a disciple who could do things, and it would be of great help to him. But, if he had a junior brother who had a good relationship with him, who was capable of doing things, and who was appreciated by his master, would that not bring him even greater benefits? In Green City, having a formidable disciple and a junior brother who had a good relationship with him were two completely different concepts. When he thought of the benefits, Taoist Yunzong could not help but burst into laughter. Coincidentally, Wu Qi had brought Taoist Yunzong to the last hall, and was gesticulating while introducing the various benefits of this hall to him. Suddenly he saw Taoist Yunzong burst into laughter. "Why are you laughing, Senior Immortal?" Wu Qi asked hastily. Taoist Yunzong gave a few loud laughs, then patted Wu Qi's shoulder and praised, "Fellow Taoist Greed, from now on, we'll be talking as equals. Don't call me Senior Immortal anymore, or else you'll be treating me like an outsider. Oh, I'll have to rely on you a lot for this matter. I hope you'll accept this small gift." Then, Taoist Yunzong stretched his hand forward and grabbed a crimson immortal sword, which was bursting with bright sparks. Pointing at the immortal sword complacently, he said with a smile, "This immortal sword is personally crafted by me, and it has been with me for 10 periods. Currently, its item spirit has cultivated to the overall strength of a 33rd tier spirit immortal, but no one has managed to refine it. Today, I'll give it to fellow Taoist Greed." Wu Qi was struck dumb, then hastily put on a flattered look and cried out, "I dare not. I dare not. This is an immortal item. How can I accept such a generous gift from you, Senior Immortal?" Taoist Yunzong pretended to be angry and cried out, "Senior Immortal? Just call me fellow Taoist. If fellow Taoist regards me as a friend, you must accept this flaming magpie sword. Otherwise, I won't accept it." Wu Qi resisted for a while, then finally put on a look as if he could not resist Taoist Yunzang's kindness. Reverently, he took over the sword. Under Taoist Yunzang's guidance, Wu Qi activated the item spirit in the sword with his own blood essence, then branded a thread of his divine will into the sword spirit. As the immortal sword was personally crafted by Taoist Yunzong, Wu Qi did not face any difficulty in refining it, and the sword spirit was very obedient. As a result, Wu Qi did not have to spend too much energy on it. Taoist Yunzong had the intention to draw him to his side, and Wu Qi had the intention to fawn on him. On top of that, because of the flaming magpie sword, their conversation became more and more passionate. Taoist Yunzong bragged to Wu Qi about the business in outer heavenly realms, while Wu Qi told him some secrets about Pangu continent which he had learned from Yu Hehuan and Reverend Sanlu. When the conversation reached a climax, both men went to the great banyan tree at the entrance of the valley, where they set up a banquet and drank to their heart's content. When they were a little tipsy, Wu Qi once again mentioned the matter of inviting the seniors of his sect in Green City to watch the opening ceremony. Taoist Yunzong applauded and applauded, agreeing with Wu Qi's suggestion. But, when it came to the specific implementation, a troubled expression appeared on his face. He frowned and did not say anything for a long while. After a while, Taoist Yunzong lowered his voice and told Wu Qi a few things with a bitter smile on his face. The reason why Taoist Yunzong came to Greenwood Mountain in just 10 days to seize the territory was because he was sent by someone. The one who ordered him to seize the territory in Greenwood Mountain was his senior brother, Taoist Yunzong. Taoist Yunzong possessed a cultivation base of 27th tier Heaven Immortal, while Taoist Yunzong had steadily attained the overall strength of 25th tier Heaven Immortal. 3,000 years ago, Taoist Yunzong and his senior brothers came to Pangu continent to replace the previous batch of disciples from Green City and establish a new Taoist Rite Temple. It was extremely difficult for an immortal sect to establish a Taoist Rite Temple and establish their own territory on Pangu continent. Especially for an immortal sect like Green City, which was guarded by a gold immortal, it was the target that Yu Dynasty paid close attention to. Although Green City had sent dozens of disciples to Pangu continent in succession, they could only establish a few footholds on the continent. Under the restriction of Yu Dynasty, they could not achieve any significant results. Taoist Yunzong and Taoist Yunzong did not get along well with each other, and the clans behind them were competitors. As a result, their relationship was very bad. Taoist Yunzong was the leader of the 36 fellow disciples on this trip to Pangu continent, and he had become the unluckiest one among them. He was the one who had to bear all the risks, hardships. As a result, Taoist Yunzong immediately sent Taoist Yunzong here to establish a Taoist Rite Temple. But anyone with a discerning eye could tell that the current lack of power around Enhe City was only temporary. As long as Patriarch Muji recovered from his injuries, or the Dark Palace behind him could send some old fiends to reinforce him, Enhe City would be completely under the control of the Dark Palace. If Taoist Yunzong came here to establish a Taoist sect at this time, wouldn't that mean he was going against Patriarch Muji? Green City's overall strength could not affect Hui Ming Heavenly Realm, and its mighty reputation could not frighten the group of fiend immortals from the Dark Palace. Patriarch Muji was from the Fiend League, and when he found out that a cultivator from the Righteous League had appeared in the territory that he had fought painstakingly for, he would not mind killing Taoist Yunzong. Senior brother Yunzong, hee. Taoist Yunzong grinned coldly and said, "He sent me here to die." But never in his wildest dreams did he expect that I could make friends with fellow Taoist greed here. With a sincere smile on his face, Wu Qi said seriously, "Green City is the #1 immortal sect in Xianyang Heavenly Realm, and it cultivates the cultivation technique of the Profound Sect. Although my cultivation base is weak, I have the heart to improve myself. Since we can meet each other, it is fate that brought us together. Naturally, I will do my best to help fellow Taoist." Taoist Yunzong nodded satisfyingly. He sighed and said, "Without the sect's decree, I can't return to Xianyang Heavenly Realm and report what happened here to my master, or else I will be severely punished. However, the formation that communicates with the sect is in the hands of senior brother Yunzong. I don't want to share the credit with him." Wu Qi nodded silently. With his help, Taoist Yunzong would be able to take over Enhe City. As long as Wu Qi changed his mind and joined Green City, Enhe City would become Green City's territory. Together with this Taoist Rite Temple, as well as those disciples with excellent spirit roots who were about to be sent here from the common people, the credit would be huge. After all, this was the first Taoist Rite temple that Green City had built on Pangu continent. However, Taoist Yunzong and Taoist Yunzong did not get along well with each other, and there was no way Taoist Yunzong could send the news back to his master through Taoist Yunzong. Otherwise, the credit would be taken by Taoist Yunzong, and it would be too stupid to work for someone else. After pondering for a brief moment, Wu Qi asked, "Is there any other way to send the news back to Green City?" Taoist Yunzong nodded, then said with a frown, "There is another place where there is a public voice transmitting formation that can send messages to outer heavenly realms. But I have to stay here and prevent Yunzong from finding out what is happening here. Therefore, when it comes to sending the message..." Taoist Yunzong turned to look at Wu Qi. Wu Qi immediately nodded his head and promised, "Then, let me handle this matter. Fellow Taoist, you only need to send 2 disciples to accompany me." Taoist Yunzong was overjoyed by Wu Qi's attitude. Without hesitation, he told Wu Qi the nearest place with a public voice transmitting formation: Qing Su Immortal Pass. Chapter 446. Early the next morning, when the sun rose and sprinkled its golden rays across the land, Wu Qi, dressed in a green Taoist robe and a red headband on his forehead, stepped onto a cloud and flew eastward, bringing with him 2 little Taoists and 2 of Taoist Yunzang's disciples. They traveled eastward from Anhui City, crossed 17,000 lofty mountains, crossed 4,900 great rivers, and passed through the territories of 7 provinces of Yu Dynasty. At last, there was a floating island floating on the ocean, named Qing Su. On it was a Qing Su Immortal Pass, and it was the destination of Wu Qi and his companions. Among the 5 of them, the 2 little Taoists were the attendants whom Wu Qi brought out from Anhui City, and they both possessed the cultivation base of Jin Dan realm. Their true forms were actually 2 celestial fiend puppets. As for Taoist Yunzang's 2 disciples, Shui Xian and Shui Yi, they were the 2 weakest heaven immortals under Taoist Yunzong. They had transcended their heavenly tribulations 100 years ago and successfully stepped into the ranks of heaven immortals. If Shui Xian and Shui Yi were in a place like Minor Heavenly Circle realm, they would be powerful enough to establish their own sects, and if Taoist Yunzong were in Puyo Heavenly Realm, he would have the overall strength of the founding ancestral master of one of the 10 great immortal sections. But in Green City, they were the most inconspicuous disciples, and all they could do was run around and run errands. When they set out, Shui Xian and Shui Yi were in high spirits, and they were very polite to Wu Qi. They did not show any disrespect to Wu Qi just because of his low cultivation base. Both of them knew very well that their master had won a great fortune this time. Once he really established his base in Anhui City and seized the foundation of 1 million miles in circumference, the reward he would receive would be extraordinary. Both of them would have a great rise in status, and they would receive great benefits as well. All these benefits came from Wu Qi. It was Wu Qi's cooperation that allowed them to open up a great situation in just 3 months, which was beyond their wildest imagination. As long as the elders of Green City arrived and Wu Qi told the fiend immortals of Dark Palace that Anhui City had always been Green City's territory, Green City would gain the upper hand in terms of morality and justice. With Green City's formidable overall strength, they would be able to firmly occupy Anhui City. This was a big piece of fat meat. These were all given to them by Wu Qi. Therefore, not only did Shui Xian and Shui Yi not show any arrogance or disrespect in front of Wu Qi, instead, they talked and laughed with Wu Qi all the way, and chatted with Wu Qi very intimately, drawing the relationship between them closer. With a smile on his face, Wu Qi flattered Shui Xian and Shui Yi, asking them about Pangu continent, the world of immortal cultivators, outer heavenly realms, and the celestial court. Although Shui Xian and Shui Yi possessed low cultivation bases, they were, after all, born in a powerful sect like Green City. Therefore, their experience and knowledge were far beyond that of others. Therefore, they did not take any precautions against Wu Qi, and as soon as they opened their mouths, they began to talk nonsense. As a result, some information revealed in their words almost made Wu Qi jump with joy. Shui told Wu Qi that their ancestral master, Reverend Liang, was the favorite of the ancestral master of Green City. As Reverend Liang was a wanderer, he always wandered around outer heavenly realms, and occasionally sneaked into Pangu continent. Therefore, the ancestral master of Green City, True Lord Green Peak, had used his connections to obtain a complete map of outer heavenly realms and a topographic map of Pangu continent from the celestial court. The complete map of outer heavenly realms contained extremely detailed information. As for the topographic map of Pangu continent, it could probably cover more than 30% of the current Pangu continent. Shui said that just to show off the favor his ancestral master had received. But when Wu Qi heard that, his heart skipped a beat, and he managed to hold back the cheer that was about to come out of his mouth. A complete map of outer heavenly realms? A map of more than 30% of Pangu continent? That was more than enough. With this map, it should not be difficult for him to find the great desolate Autark Valley and the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean. As long as he could plot against Reverend Liang in Anhui City, Wu Qi would be able to go to the Northern Ocean and search for the innate yang energy with a peace of mind. Once the yin and yang energies and the energy of 5 elements were gathered, he would shatter his innate nascent soul and form his innate nascent divinity, and then a faint smile emerged on Wu Qi's face. Suddenly, he pointed at a lofty mountain that towered into the clouds and said, "Fellow Taoists, we've been traveling for more than half a day. Why don't we go up there and have some wine and fresh fruits, and enjoy the scenery?" Shui Xian and Shui Yi were instructed by Taoist Yunzong to go out this time, and everything was decided by Wu Qi. They only needed to point out the direction to Qing Su Immortal Pass. Therefore, when Wu Qi said that they had been flying for more than half a day, they decided to take a rest in the lofty mountain in front of them. After all, they did not have to be in a hurry to send a message to Green City. Even if Reverend Liang received the message and came here immediately, it would be a few years later. There was no need to be in such a hurry. The group of 5 descended on the cloud and landed on the mountain peak. 2 little Taoists brought out a round table and stool and served Wu Qi, Shui Xian, and Shui. Shui Xian and Shui Yi picked up their wine bowls and glanced at the picturesque scenery around them. They could not help but exclaim in admiration. The lofty mountain was the tallest mountain within 10,000 miles of the area. As far as the eye could see, the peaks and valleys looked like a cluster of mountains, and the waves looked like furious waves. Clouds and mists hovered above the mountains and rivers. It was indeed a beautiful scenery. Wu Qi picked up his wine bowl and said politely, "Fellow Taoists, we hit it off at first sight. Come, let's drink to our heart's content." Shui Xian and Shui Yi raised their wine bowls and burst into loud laughter, clinking their bowls with Wu Qi's, then opened their mouths and poured half a liter of wine into their mouths. It was a fragrant aroma that came straight from one's internal organs, drifting out through the pores and reaching a distance of 20 to 30 feet away. It was an indescribable fragrance. The aroma made Shui Xian and Shui Yi stare blankly, and suddenly, they fell to the ground. Wu Qi threw away the wine bowl and rose to his feet slowly, staring coldly at Shui Xian and Shui. He cupped his fist and said with a sigh, Actually, there is no enmity between you and me. But, who asked you to come from a poor background? Are you from Green City? Your master has even killed Hidden Heart and Guarding Heart, who saved my life. You can't blame me for this." The bodies of the 2 little Taoists who served beside him twisted, then slowly expanded and transformed into 2 celestial fiend puppets, each standing 10 feet tall and with a bronze body. Wu Qi pointed his finger at Shui Xian and Shui. Immediately, the 2 puppets transformed into 2 afterimages and plunged down, easily fusing into their bodies. A strange chewing and swallowing sound rang out from within their bodies. Suddenly, a bright light shone from between their brows, amidst which 2 human-shaped immortal souls appeared, standing there blankly like 2 wooden men. But very soon, countless black threads shot out from their bodies like smoke and mist, tightly binding their immortal souls and slowly dragging them into their bodies, turning them into a black cocoon of light. Their immortal souls were quickly digested, and all their memories were seized by the puppets. Only their true spirits remained, as they were firmly suppressed in the depths of their bodies with a mystic technique. As long as their true spirits remained, even if there were mystic techniques such as soul jade slips in Green City, they would not know that Shui Xin and Shui Yi had been controlled by someone. Very soon, the two puppets rose to their feet, bowed to Wu Qi, and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, Shui Xin and Shui Yi offer greetings." Wu Qi laughed aloud as he cupped his fist and returned the greeting, "Fellow Taoist, you are too courteous. In the future, we will have to work together." The three of them looked at each other and laughed. Two dark shadows shot out from under Wu Qi's feet and slowly transformed into two little Taoists, standing next to Wu Qi with a smile on their faces. This time, Wu Qi did not dawdle. He exerted all his strength, and the group of 5 broke through the void, rushing towards Qing Su Immortal Pass with teleportation. Along the way, except when they were approaching the cities of Yu Dynasty, when they would cautiously travel through underground using escape arts, they had been teleporting with all their strength. After traveling like this for 1.5 months, they finally came to a vast body of water. It was a large lake surrounded by mountains. Wu Qi unleashed his divine will, but he could not reach the other side of the lake. Strong gusts of wind rolled up the green water of the lake, which smashed against the reefs on the shore and sent up countless white foams. Not far away from Wu Qi and his companions, several thousand longbow men were working hard. Under the command of a group of heavily armored warriors, they were hammering iron stakes, each about 10 feet thick, on the shore and coiling them with bull-thick alloy chains. Hundreds of such iron stakes and chains were spread across the shore of the lake, covering an area of 100 miles in circumference. Wu Qi scanned them with his divine will. These iron stakes were about 3,000 feet long, and those longbow men were wielding huge iron hammers and hammering them with all their strength, driving them deep into the reefs on the shore, which were a few times stronger than pig iron. The chains were several hundred miles long, stretching all the way to a far distance. With his good eyesight, Wu Qi saw a group of longbow men working on the other side of the lake from several hundred miles away. They were grilling meat over a huge bonfire, and the meat being grilled was actually several thousand feet long serpents and flood dragons. Hundreds of serpents and flood dragons were grilled over the bonfire, with fat dripping down from their bodies. While drooling, those longbow men were excitedly smearing all kinds of spices on the bodies of these serpents and flood dragons. Next to those longbow men were a large group of about 20,000 feathermen. They were clad in light metal armors, had a pair of wings on their backs, and held bows and arrows in their hands. They were squatting on the cliffs around them, humming folk tunes while watching these longbow men working. Apart from these feathermen, there were also some people who were born with only one arm and one leg, but each had a third eye on their forehead. They were concocting some kind of ointment, filling hundreds of large water vats with sticky liquid. Fist-sized bubbles kept popping up from the dark liquid. Wu Qi stared blankly at these busy people. It seemed they were planning something big. While he was wondering what these people were going to do, suddenly, several dozens of knights clad in golden armors and mounted on single-horned, winged Pegasi came running at top speed towards Wu Qi. Surprisingly, the leader of the knights was a tall, slender, and beautiful female general. Even from a distance, she shouted at Wu Qi, "Hey, you immortal cultivator, don't bring disaster to your sect. Our prefecture overseer is going to hunt a gale, so leave quickly. If you delay our prefecture overseer's important matter, we'll definitely raise your sect to the ground and kill every single one of you." Wu Qi was stunned. Hunt a gale? Gale? The legendary divine beast Gale? What a fierce and domineering woman. She kept saying that she would raise his sect to the ground and kill every single one of them. She was way too fierce. While Wu Qi was cursing the woman in his mind, a golden-armored knight had already grabbed a double-edged battle-axe and thrown it towards Wu Qi from 3 miles away with the momentum from the galloping Pegasi. A strange whistling noise rang out, as the axe turned into a cold gleam and arrived before Wu Qi in a blink of an eye. Chapter 447. Wu Qi gave a cold snort and pointed his finger forward. When the 3 javelins were still over 1,000 feet away from him, they suddenly froze in the air. Then he slightly waved his finger. Along with a shrill swishing noise, the 3 javelins darted back at him at a speed that was tens of times faster than when they came, reaching right in front of the burly man. Up in the air, the woman's eye corners twitched with anger. She pointed her finger at Wu Qi and roared, "How dare you? How dare you kill my general right in front of me? You thief, tell me your name if you have the guts." For the span of a few breaths, Wu Qi casually punched out with his fist. The pure strength of his fleshly body shook the surrounding air violently, and the pillar of wind collapsed with a loud boom. The raging force of the wind transformed into countless wind blades that scattered in all directions, and even the ground was sliced and thinned by the wind blades. Dust rose in all directions. Sand and stones wrapped Wu Qi and his companions, making their silhouettes blurry and indistinguishable. Shui Exin flashed across the air and darted in front of Wu Qi. A deafening boom rang out like the ringing of a giant bell. The double-edged battle-axe exploded into pieces on Shui Exin's body, splashing all over the ground. The burly man who threw the battle-axe roared out in shock. Refusing to believe what just happened, he took out another 3 javelins and threw them towards Wu Qi. Unwilling to let Wu Qi go just like that, the girl flapped the green wings on her back, turned into a beam of green light, and followed closely behind Wu Qi. Shaking his head, Wu Qi gave a long and sonorous roar. Suddenly, a large cloud of earth energy rushed out from under his feet. Along with a deep buzzing noise, the earth energy was transformed into magnetic force by Wu Qi. Bringing up a dazzling dark light, he wrapped Shui Exin, Shui Yi, and the 2 Taoist boys with his sword and flew tens of miles away in a flash. He shouted coldly, "I won't bother with a woman like you. Damn it, I didn't check the almanac when I went out, and I bumped into you bastards." The sword power landed on Shui Exin and Shui Yi's body. Along with a shrill swishing noise, the sword power was shattered and absorbed the surrounding air, transforming into tens of bull-thick, miles-tall tornadoes, spinning swiftly around Wu Qi and the others. These gusts of wind were as dense as stone pillars, clashing and rubbing against each other, causing loud banging noises. The wind pillars swirled up the surrounding air, bringing with it a large number of palm-sized wind blades that slashed at Wu Qi and the others. Looking down condescendingly at Wu Qi, the lady cried out coldly, "3 heaven immortals? Where are you going? What are you going to do? Why did he come here? Don't you know that the prefecture overseer has already issued a ban 3 days ago, sealing off the entire area within a radius of 5,000 kilometers and forbidding any cultivators from entering?" With a blink of his body, he teleported several dozens of times within a small area, and each time he managed to move himself a few feet away, dodging those arrows by a hair's breadth. Accompanied by shrill whistling noises, the arrows brushed past Wu Qi's body and pierced into the reef behind Wu Qi, leaving several miles deep holes in the ground. Wu Qi looked back at those holes and felt his scalp go numb. He did not use any magical power, and fought like a body cultivator who was qualified to be a body cultivator. The lady had just sprung up from the back of the Pegasus and was about to rush down with a long sword in her hand, pointing the tip of the sword straight at Wu Qi's chest. All of a sudden, Wu Qi unleashed a restrictive spell, causing the lady's body to stiffen in midair. She gave a muffled snort in annoyance, then flapped her wings and plunged into her body. A clear cry towered into the sky, as a pair of green wings suddenly sprouted out from her back. With a powerful flap of the wings, several tens of feet long, a whirlwind made of goat horns rose from the ground and rose into the sky. The air around her was filled with a crisp crackling noise, as all the restrictive spells were shattered. The lady transformed into a green shadow and shot up into the sky, hovering several miles above the ground. However, Wu Qi's cultivation base was very strong now, and with the help of the magnetic force of the earth, his speed was far faster than any ordinary escape beam. The lady had pursued Wu Qi for over 10,000 miles, but she could never get close to Wu Qi. On the contrary, Wu Qi had gradually pulled a distance of nearly 100 miles away from her. The lady was infuriated, but she had no choice but to turn around and fly back unwillingly. Riding on the Pegasus, The lady warrior came to less than 300 feet away from Wu Qi, frowning as she looked at the place filled with dust. Wu Qi snorted coldly. He parted the water will and water heart, then leaned forward and dashed out, leaving dozens of afterimages behind him. In just a blink of an eye, he had come before the lady. He slapped the woman in the face and scolded her sternly, "How can you do things like this? It's fine if you threaten me, but before I even say a word, you killed me. What's so great about you?" Between the eyebrows, eyes, throat, heart. Despite the distance of over 100 miles, these feathered men's arrows were so accurate that even Wu Qi was shocked. Wu Qi snorted coldly, looked at the lady and growled, "Do you think only you have the right to curse and kill people? How can there be such a rule in the world?" Wu Qi was infuriated. This burly man really had a death wish. He had spared his life, yet he still dared to speak ill of him. With such a high speed, even those burly men, whose overall strength was not weaker than nascent soul cultivators, did not have the time to react. 3 javelins shot out and came right in front of the burly man's face, sticking closely to his face. As the Pegasus he was riding sped forward, it was as if the javelins were glued to his body. The man was so frightened that cold sweat kept breaking out from his body, and his forehead was dripping with sweat. However, as Wu Qi's fleshly body had broken through to the 35 transformations of Heavenly Dragon, the toughness of his fleshly body was beyond anyone's imagination, while Shui Exen, Shui Yi, and the 2 Taoist boys were celestial fiend puppets. They did not have fleshly bodies, but puppets that were 100 times tougher than magical treasures and spirit items. When the wind blades hacked on their bodies, they only produced shrill, unpleasant noises of friction and produced large amounts of sparks, but failed to hurt even a single hair on their bodies. The woman yelled out, "That feels great." Behind her, a green halo emerged, and the huge, green, bird-shaped beast's soul soared into the sky. Countless green light beams darted out of the beast's soul and drilled into the woman's body. Suddenly, the girl's speed increased by more than 10 times. Before Wu Qi could throw out his fist, she had already punched 3 times in a row on Wu Qi's chest. Each of the punches was as heavy as Mount Tai, and in each of them came an extremely sharp and explosive energy of green element, which came with a tremendous spiraling force and smashed into Wu Qi's body. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps rang out from a distance. Upon hearing the whistle, those longbow men, who were working hard to drive the iron stakes into the ground, threw down their tools and rushed over. It would have been fine if these longbow men did not move, but as soon as they did, a gust of wind immediately formed around them. Strong gusts of wind rose from under their feet, lifting their huge bodies that stood over 10,000 feet tall as they roared and charged towards Wu Qi. "No one in the entire Feng province has ever dared to make fun of me, Feng Qinggu." The leader of the team, the female captain, gave a furious cry. Her slender and strong legs clamped down on the Pegasus, then she sped up and rode towards Wu Qi. When she was still about 1 mile away from Wu Qi, she pulled out the sword hanging on her waist and swung it horizontally across the air. A beautiful green bird shaped like a luan suddenly flashed behind her, and a clear cry rang out. Right after that, a 1,000 feet long green sword beam was spat out from the tip of the sword, and in the blink of an eye, it had come right in front of Wu Qi. He gave the burly man a fierce glare. A bright gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes, as he had activated the mystic technique of mystic eyes of universe that could hurt people with just a glance. His glare made the burly man and Wu Qi's eyes meet, and they immediately felt as if they were in the 18th level of hell, with countless little ghosts carrying countless blades, spears, swords, and halberds, cutting and hacking crazily on his body. In an instant, countless tiny bloody wounds appeared on the large man's body. In the blink of an eye, the large man's body suddenly disintegrated, and a bloody soul appeared in broad daylight. After letting out a mournful howl, it suddenly turned into a wisp of green smoke. Wu Qi fled at an incredible speed. The woman only saw a blur before Wu Qi fled several tens of miles away. The sound of hooves thundered out like thunder as several dozens of golden-armored knights rode over. Cautiously, They stopped about 1,000 feet away from Wu Qi, pulled out their weapons, and stared coldly at Wu Qi. Flustered and exasperated, the burly man grabbed the 3 javelins that were almost glued to his face, pointed them at Wu Qi and growled, "You bastard! Tell me your name." Wu Qi did not move, and neither did Shui Xian. Shui Yi took a step forward and stood shoulder to shoulder with Shui Xian in front of Wu Qi. Among the several thousand longbow men, a dozen of them had an aura comparable to that of heaven immortals. Among the tens of thousands of feathermen, there were also a few who had the aura of a heaven immortal. On top of that, the woman in front of him was terrifyingly fast, and her strength was not to be underestimated. Immediately, Wu Qi gave up the impulse to argue with these people. Wu Qi performed an incantation gesture with both hands, pointed his finger at the woman, and cried out sternly, "Freeze!" With a muffled snort, Wu Qi was knocked flying backward and slammed heavily into Shui Xian and Shui. The innate yin energy in his body surged, and suddenly, Wu Qi's body became several hundred times softer and more feminine than the water of extreme yin. His body was wriggling slightly, and in the instant of the collision, his body vibrated hundreds of thousands of times. In just a blink of an eye, the 3 powerful forces that the woman had smashed into his body were expelled out of his body and sent into Shui Xian and Shui Yi's body. Staring at Wu Qi, the woman clenched her jaws fiercely, then suddenly gave a shrill whistle. The woman reacted very quickly. As soon as Wu Qi slapped her, she immediately gave a backhand slap and parried Wu Qi's palm. Wu Qi gave a startled cry and gave her another slap with his left hand. However, the woman was a little faster than Wu Qi. She parried Wu Qi's slap again, then thrust her palm towards Wu Qi's face. Wu Qi gave a furious roar. His arms moved like a gust of wind, leaving numerous afterimages behind as he transformed into 1,000-armed guanyin, thrusting his fists down like shooting stars. Loud flapping noises of wings echoed out, as several tens of thousands of feathermen from several hundred miles away soared into the sky. Like a large dark cloud, they let out cheers of joy and swarmed towards Wu Qi from all directions. While they were still over 100 miles away from Wu Qi, a dozen feathermen with very strong cultivation base had already drawn their bows and shot several dozens of arrows towards Wu Qi like a storm. The furious voice of the lady could be heard echoing through the air, "Pass my order." That evil Taoist must have gone to Qing Su Immortal Pass to run some errands. Order the guards of Qing Su Immortal Pass to capture him alive. I'm going to skin him alive. Shui Xian and Shui Yi gave a loud cry. Their bodies shot backward like cannonballs, smashing brutally into a lofty mountain several tens of miles away. A loud boom rang out as the mountain, which stood several miles tall, crumbled abruptly. Countless fist-sized rocks shot in all directions. Shui Xian and Shui Yi had transferred all the strange forces in their bodies out, then their bodies flashed and returned before Wu Qi. Chapter 448. After flying for over 30,000 miles above the lake, a dark shadow suddenly appeared on the surface of the lake, which had turned dark green. Wu Qi focused his eyes and looked in that direction. It was a huge black turtle, its back measuring over 4,000 miles in circumference. It was floating on the surface of the lake with a small island on its back. Its neck and limbs were shrunk into its shell, and only its tail, about 100 miles long, was floating lazily on the surface of the lake. Occasionally, it would drop its tail and raise a huge wave that was over 10,000 feet high. When the waves hit the surface of the lake, they produced muffled booms that sounded like thunderclaps, sending the foam flying dozens of miles away. When the sunlight shone on the white foam, it looked like a rainbow was hanging high up in the sky. This was Qing Su Immortal Pass, the market closest to Anhui City where immortal cultivators openly gathered on Pangu continent. Originally, this lake was a huge mountain range that stretched for billions of miles. Many years ago, the successor of an almighty immortal secretly established a Taoist right temple in this mountain range to preach the Tao. In its heyday, it had recruited several 100,000 mortal disciples to preach the Tao and cultivate there. As a result, the official of Yu dynasty was infuriated and a greedy prefecture overseer sent an army to besiege the mountain range. The war lasted for 2 years, and the entire mountain range was sunk by tens of thousands of miles, turning into a huge lake. As a result, the almighty immortal flew into a rage. He summoned his friends and brought a large group of powerful immortals to Pangu continent to seek an explanation. The almighty immortal even had a nepotistic relationship with a few of the most powerful figures in the celestial court. As a result, after a series of public relations, the prefecture overseer was stripped of his position and demoted to a commoner, and the titles of several hundred generals who participated in the siege were stripped. The almighty immortal was still brooding over this result. So, he simply found an ancient giant turtle from an outer heavenly realm and threw it into the lake, built an island on its back, and opened a market for immortal cultivators. Obviously, the almighty immortal was too stingy, and had purposely built such a market to annoy the people of Yu Dynasty. Unfortunately, he had a strong backer, and the current human emperor was too weak to do anything to him. Therefore, Qing Su Immortal Pass had been developing until now. But after all, this was Pangu continent, the nominal territory of the human emperor. Therefore, Yu Dynasty had to maintain its dignity. Therefore, the human emperor set up a garrison on this small island, and assigned a general to lead an army of 100,000 to guard this place. He named it Qing Su Immortal Pass. Immortal Pass was the meaning of customs. When immortals entered or left, they had to report to the Guardian General's yamen and receive their identity documents. On top of that, only immortals who had obtained an identity certificate could freely enter and exit the human cities on Pangu continent. For a cultivator like Wu Qi, even though he was a disciple of Euphoria Heavenly Palace, if he mistakenly entered a place governed by a prefecture overseer, he would be killed, and none of the ministers of Yu Dynasty would have to take responsibility for him. On the other hand, if Wu Qi could obtain an official identity certificate from an official garrison of Yu Dynasty, such as Qing Su Immortal Pass, after registering his identity, background, and sect, he would be able to freely enter and exit the human cities, and those ministers of Yu Dynasty would not be able to kill a cultivator like him. After all, some cultivators from outer heavenly realms came to Pangu continent to purchase some cultivation materials from the official markets of Yu Dynasty, and the officials of Yu Dynasty had earned an astronomical amount of profit from these transactions. Therefore, those immortal cultivators who had obtained an official identity certificate could not be killed at will. Isn't it just an identity certificate? Wu Qi retracted the escape beam, changed into a new Taoist robe, and slightly adjusted his visage. After that, he retracted all 4 celestial fiend puppets back into his body, then stepped onto a watery cloud and drifted slowly towards Qing Su Immortal Pass. When he was still about 100 miles away from Qing Su Immortal Pass, a group of several dozens of human warriors were seen approaching slowly in the void ahead, driving a dragon-shaped flying ship. Standing on the prow of the ship was a captain with a scroll of portrait in his hand. He studied Wu Qi from head to toe for a while, then shouted, "Hey, immortal cultivator, where are you from? What are you going to Qing Su Immortal Pass for? Do you have any companions?" With his keen eyesight, Wu Qi saw the faces of people through the scroll of portrait. 3 adults and 2 Taoists. Obviously, they were the faces of Wu Qi and his companions when he was fighting with Feng Qingwu just now. Smacking his lips, Wu Qi sighed with emotion at the efficiency of the official forces of Yu Dynasty, then cupped his fist and said, "Fellow Taoist, I'm Greed, and I'm going to Qing Su Immortal Pass to purchase some herbs. I've always been alone, and I don't have any companions." The captain gave a cold snort, then grabbed a round mirror tied on his belt and waved it at Wu Qi. A misty yellow light sprinkled onto Wu Qi's body, and a faint green gleam suddenly flashed across the mirror. The captain sneered and said, "How dare a mere peak-stage nascent soul cultivator travel across Qing Su?" Fiercely pointing his finger at Wu Qi's nose, the captain snapped, "After you enter the island, you will have to go to the town center to apply for an identity certificate. If a cultivator without an identity certificate takes a wrong step on the island, he will be killed. If he dares to cause trouble, he will be killed. If he dares to talk nonsense, he will be killed. In short, if you refuse to apply for an identity certificate, I have 10,000 reasons to kill you. Do you understand? Wu Qi bowed and did not say a word. The captain gave Wu Qi a fierce glare and cursed under his breath, then waved his hand and ordered the flying ship to move forward slowly. The cloud behind them moved, and 13 flying ships of the same size slowly flew out from it, following behind the flying ship from a distance. Wu Qi gave the 13 flying ships a glance. Each of them was fully armed with soldiers, and there were at least 3,000 of them in total. Twitching his lips, Wu Qi cursed under his breath, "Do they have to go to such lengths just for me? How many humans are there on Pangu continent? Why are there so many soldiers running around all the time?" After giving the flying ships a glance, Wu Qi shook his head and said, "Apart from a few captains whose overall strength is close to heaven immortals, and those middle-ranked captains whose cultivation base is comparable to nascent soul cultivators and Jindan cultivators, the rest are just ordinary soldiers. What can they do when facing cultivators? To court death?" Wu Qi thought for a while, and found that neither Yu Huan's confession nor Shui Xian and Shui Yi's memories had anything to do with these ordinary soldiers. Nevertheless, Wu Qi had a feeling that the human race would not be so stupid. Surely, these ordinary soldiers would not be sent to court death when fighting cultivators, right? Since they were on the flying ships, they must have their reasons. But Wu Qi still could not figure out what the purpose of these soldiers was. With a flick of his sleeve, Wu Qi continued to fly forward slowly on the cloud. When he was still 30 miles away from Qing Su Immortal Pass, his body suddenly became heavy, and the cloud nearly shattered to pieces. A restrictive spell had been cast on this place, and the further he went, the stronger the spell became. By the time Wu Qi arrived on the island, the strength of the spell had reached a level that made one speechless. Apart from heaven immortals, no cultivators could fly here and could only walk on their feet. Vaguely visible signs of divine will could be seen in the void, guiding him to follow them all the way until he arrived at the area of the island that was close to the turtle head. Glancing around, he found that the natural energy on the island was being pushed away by a tremendous force. As the natural energy on the island was very thin, apart from heaven immortals with formidable cultivation base, any cultivators below the realm of nascent divinity would become no different from a mortal if they depleted all their energy. On top of that, the ground was paved with a thick layer of spirit-repelling black loathsome iron. It was a strange or that had a very strong resistance to the Tao of 5 elements, and could prevent all natural energy from passing through it. It was often used by immortal cultivators to build their treasure vaults, as it could effectively prevent all escape arts from passing through. Right after Wu Qi landed on the island, a pair of men clad in a long black linen robe and tall black crowns came up to him with quick steps. They cupped their fists toward Wu Qi and said with a stern face, "This way. Is this your first time coming to Qing Su Immortal Pass? Prepare 10 pieces of low-grade spiritual stones to handle your identity certificate." Wu Qi gave them a look, then followed them and walked along a path, heading towards a pitch-black palace ahead of them. It was a place filled with pitch-black, square-shaped stone palaces that looked exactly the same. In front of each palace stood a huge stone pillar, the top of which was sunken and filled with sticky kerosene. A green flame soared to over 10 feet high, and even though it was broad daylight, the green flame still gave the surrounding a wretched shade of green. Cultivators kept landing here, and men clad in the same black clothes and black hats came up to them, leading them to follow Wu Qi into the palace. Wu Qi turned around and gave those cultivators a glance. The weakest among them were peak-stage Xiantian realm, while the strongest among them were middle-grade heaven immortals. But, regardless of their cultivation base, when faced with these men clad in black clothes and black hats, who did not possess any cultivation base or aura of an expert, all the cultivators just followed them with a gloomy face. None of them said a word. This was the deterring power of Yu Dynasty to immortal cultivators. Compared to them, outer heavenly realms were much better. At least, those immortal monarchs and immortal officials of the celestial courts still dared to attack the protector of the land sent by Yu Dynasty. But on Pangu continent, it seemed the power of Yu Dynasty had completely suppressed the arrogance of immortal cultivators. Apart from a few territories that were invaded by immortal sects, like in He City, the rest of the territories were completely under the rule of Yu Dynasty. Wu Qi thought to himself that perhaps the existence of places like He City had something to do with Qing Su Immortal Pass. Perhaps, it was because of the bad precedent set by Qing Su Immortal Pass that the immortal sects could invade Pangu continent with ease, and the reaction of Yu Dynasty became softer. Otherwise, with the overall strength of Yu Dynasty, the power behind He City was merely Patriarch Muji and Arhat Wrath, and they would have long destroyed all the immortal sects around He City. Wu Qi followed the two men into the grand hall. The hall was filled with long tables, and behind each table sat a scholar with a stiff expression. Wu Qi followed the two men and came before one of the tables. The scholar sitting behind the table asked with a gloomy face, "Name, background, cultivation technique, Taoist League, Buddhist League, Demon League, Ghost Cultivator, or Qing Su Immortal Pass does not welcome cultivators from the Fiend League. Those Demon League and Ghost Cultivators who like to feast on blood should behave themselves as well. Also, if you are carrying any prohibited items, such as heavenly ghosts from the Ghost Realm, you are not allowed to enter Qing Su Immortal Pass." From the drawer under the table, the scholar pulled out a book as thick as a brick and threw it over to Wu Qi. The cost of the identity certificate is 10 lower-grade energy stones, and this book, 1000 Restrictive Rules of Qing Su Immortal Pass, costs 100 lower-grade energy stones. That's a total of 125 lower-grade energy stones. Wu Qi was struck dumb. Holding the thick book in his arms, he asked, 110 lower-grade energy stones? How come it is 125 lower-grade energy stones? The scholar and the two men standing next to Wu Qi gave him a glare at the same time. The man standing on the left of Wu Qi snapped in a low voice, "You immortal cultivators, it is easy for you to earn money. If you cause any trouble in Qing Su Immortal Pass, won't you need our help to deal with it?" Wu Qi was enlightened. So, the other 15 lower-grade energy stones were the payment for their hard work? Grinning, Wu Qi made up a story about his identity and background, then fished out 2 middle-grade energy stones and placed them on the table. The scholar put the 2 middle-grade energy stones directly into his pocket. Instead of giving Wu Qi the change, he gave Wu Qi a small token forged from black iron on top of the identity certificate. He squeezed out a smile and said, "This token proves that fellow Taoist has a pure character and is an orthodox cultivator. It will be more convenient for you to travel on the island." Wu Qi opened his mouth, but did not say anything. Clenching his teeth, he took over the identity certificate made from white paper and the iron token that weighed less than 1 kilogram. Chapter 449. The total cost of the iron sheet did not exceed 10 coins, which proved that Wu Qi was a man with a pure character. "It means I'm a good man." Wu Qi fiddled with the iron medallion tied to his belt as he strolled on the street of the largest immortal market in Qing Su Immortal Pass. He grumbled, "Just a piece of iron skin like this for 75 low-grade spirit stones? A good man? Your whole family is good people, and your mother is the best of the best. That's why she gave birth to you bastards." There were nearly 10,000 shops in this street called Qing Su Immortal Square, and about 1 million immortal cultivators were stationed here. The number of cultivators who came and went varied. When there was a good item, the number of cultivators would increase by leaps and bounds in a single day, but when there was nothing good, no one would come here for 3 to 5 years. The antique shops in the mortal world were particular about not opening for business for 3 years, but when they did, they would eat for 3 years. And the slogan of the shops in Qing Su Immortal Square was, "Not opening for business for 10,000 years, but when they did, they would eat for 10,000 years." Some shops might not be able to make a deal even in 300 to 500 years, but as long as they were lucky enough to find a good item and auction it at a high price, not only would they have all the materials they needed to cultivate for the next 10,000 years, they would also have all the materials needed by a small sect behind them. As he was not in a hurry to send a message to the people in Green City, Wu Qi strolled on the street in a carefree manner, fiddling with the iron medallion while glancing at the passers-by from time to time. The clothes and appearances of immortal cultivators were very strange, and apart from the people of Longbow Kingdom, he could see cultivators of all kinds of strange races. There were also winged people, one-armed, one-legged, three-eyed people, people born with a large hole in their chests, and people with two faces on the front and back of their heads, with the expressions of the two faces being the exact opposite of each other. These people were all subspecies of human beings, and they belonged to the same human race. Apart from the people of Longbow Kingdom who could not transcend their thunder tribulation, the difficulty of cultivating immortal Tao for these subspecies was about the same as that of human beings. Furthermore, these strange subspecies had all kinds of strange innate divine abilities, and the spells they cultivated were usually much stronger than those of normal human cultivators. Therefore, in Qingsu Immortal Square, the most common cultivators were the human race, while the rest were the cultivators of these strange subspecies. Apart from the crowds of cultivators, armored patrolling soldiers could be seen walking on the street from time to time. These soldiers were all human beings. Apart from the officer who possessed a beast soul, the rest looked ordinary and did not emanate any energy aura. However, wherever these patrol squads passed, even those proud heaven immortals would cautiously make way for them. No one was willing to offend them. The officers and soldiers of the patrol team looked at all the cultivators around them with vigilant eyes. It was as though these cultivators were all serious criminals. Occasionally, when someone glanced at Wu Qi and noticed the small iron medallion hanging on his waist, these soldiers would glance at it and no longer pay any attention to Wu Qi. Wu Qi nodded his head silently. That scholar was a little greedy, but the little iron medallion he gave Wu Qi did have some effect. Those lower-grade energy stones were worth it. Energy rotting ghost mushroom? Wu Qi's ears twitched violently. Right when the name energy rotting ghost mushroom came out of his mouth, his body turned blurry, and in the blink of an eye, he was already in front of the wooden building. Wu Qi's ears twitched violently. Right when the name energy rotting ghost mushroom came out of his mouth, his body suddenly turned blurry, and with a teleportation, he arrived in front of the wooden building. A few swooshing noises rang out as a few dark shadows flashed around Wu Qi, as a few cultivators dressed in Taoist robes also arrived with teleportation. Wu Qi and the few cultivators exchanged a few glances, then all of them turned to look at Wu Qi in astonishment. To be able to use the divine ability of teleportation in Qingsu Immortal Pass, it could only be done by someone who possessed the overall strength of a heaven immortal. However, the aura emanating from Wu Qi was clearly that of a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator. It was different from deliberately concealing one's aura. When a heaven immortal concealed his aura, he could disguise himself as a mortal. But, no matter how a heaven immortal concealed his aura, he could not make his aura reveal the unique aura of a nascent soul cultivator. Besides, how could a nascent soul cultivator break through space and teleport? The few heaven immortals stared blankly at Wu Qi. For a moment, they had all forgotten the purpose of their visit. Meanwhile, Wu Qi gave them a smile, then rushed into the building and shouted at the top of his voice, "Where is the energy-rotting ghost mushroom? How much is it? I'll buy it from you." Inside the lobby, the few managers sitting behind the counters raised their heads and looked at Wu Qi at the same time. Two middle-aged men standing before the counter, whose cultivation base was roughly at the level of Jin Dan, shrunk back nervously, shielding an object glinting with a bright green glow placed on the counter. The other heaven immortals who arrived at the same time as Wu Qi were taken aback, then hastily rushed into the building after him. An old Taoist, who was short and shriveled, had a greenish face that made him look like a green-skinned zombie, and was so ugly that he could scare anyone to death, cried out sternly, "Wait! Energy-rotting ghost mushroom? If it is a real energy-rotting ghost mushroom, I'll exchange it with an immortal item." The atmosphere in the lobby immediately turned very strange. A few cultivators who were doing business in the lobby cautiously retreated to the foot of the wall, staring at Wu Qi and the few heaven immortals with vigilance. Two middle-aged cultivators shuddered with fear, then hastily picked up the object placed on the counter. Behind the counter, a fat and round manager, clad in a light blue long robe embroidered with gold patterns, walked out hastily like a meatball and bowed to Wu Qi and the others. Fellow immortal masters, please forgive me for not welcoming you earlier. I'm Zibei, the manager of this Myriad Herbs Hall. Myriad Herbs Hall is the property of immortal monarch Ziluo. I believe you must have heard of our name, Immortal Monarch? With just a few words, Zibei told them about his background. After that, he pointed at the two middle-aged men and said smilingly, "It was these two fellow Taoists who cried out just now, which brought all of you here, immortal masters." The muscles on Zibei's face were twitching, and his heart was throbbing painfully. There was a complicated look in his eyes as he stared at the two Jin Dan cultivators, his eyes filled with blame. Wu Qi was amused. He pointed at the two Jin Dan cultivators and asked, "The energy rotting ghost mushroom belongs to them?" Myriad Herbs Hall has not purchased their energy rotting ghost mushroom, right? In other words, they are still the owners of the energy rotting ghost mushroom? The fat on Zibei's body began to tremble violently. Clenching his teeth in pain, he said, "Senior, please understand. These two fellow Taoists, just when they took out the energy-rotting ghost mushroom, they cried out, and all of you immortal masters came here immediately. This energy-rotting ghost mushroom is indeed their personal item." The few managers of Myriad Herbs Hall had an unsightly expression on their faces. The way they looked at the two Jin Dan cultivators was enough to kill them. If not for the presence of Wu Qi and a few other uninvited guests, perhaps they would have already torn these two Jin Dan cultivators into pieces. Wu Qi smiled. He had a rough idea of what had happened here. Two Jin Dan cultivators had come to Myriad Herbs Hall with a parcel, asking to sell some herbs. Judging from the shabby attire of these two Jin Dan cultivators, the managers of Myriad Herbs Hall did not bring them to the room on the upper floor, which was specially used to purchase precious herbs. When the energy-rotting ghost mushroom appeared, one of the managers let out a small cry, while the two Jin Dan cultivators intentionally shouted out loud. They were two very cunning Jin Dan cultivators. Wu Qi gave them a glance, giving them a label in his mind. The loud shout was the finishing touch, as it had attracted Wu Qi and the 7 heaven immortals behind him. With that, the price of the energy-rotting ghost mushroom could not be lowered any further. Shaking his head, Wu Qi turned to the two simple and honest Jin Dan cultivators and asked, "Fellow Taoists, before you came to Myriad Herbs Hall, did you know that this is an energy-rotting ghost mushroom? Hee, I thought you at least know how precious it is, don't you?" The two Jin Dan cultivators exchanged a glance, then gave Zibei a cautious look. One of them nodded and said, "We brothers do know the name of the energy-rotting ghost mushroom, but we dare not be sure if this is the real deal. That's why we came to Myriad Herbs Hall to have a look at it, managers. The few of you have a pair of sharp eyes, and with just one glance, you could tell that this is indeed an energy-rotting ghost mushroom. That's why we brothers cried out in surprise. Please excuse us, senior immortals." Wu Qi smiled. It was as he had expected. As the two brothers were not sure what exactly the thing in their hands was, they came to Myriad Herbs Hall. They did not want to sell the energy-rotting ghost mushroom to Myriad Herbs Hall. Therefore, once they confirmed that this thing was indeed the treasure they thought it was, they immediately cried out. There were many heaven immortals in Qingsu Immortal Pass, and many of them had a keen eye. The name of the energy-rotting ghost mushroom was more than enough to attract a satisfied customer. While Wu Qi was laughing inwardly, Zibei turned to the two cultivators with a gloomy face and said, "So, you are trying to make us, Myriad Herbs Hall, appraise it for you for free? There is no such logic under the heaven." The green-skinned, ugly old Taoist rolled his eyes and roared furiously at Zibei. "Nonsense! What logic? In short, Myriad Herbs Hall has yet to buy this energy-rotting ghost mushroom, and these two brothers are still its owners. Therefore, we are offering a price to buy it. What does this have to do with Myriad Herbs Hall? Cut the crap, or I'll wipe out Myriad Herbs Hall. Do you think Ziluo Immortal is that great? If he has what it takes, he can come here right now. Otherwise, I can kill you like killing chickens." Zibei's body was shivering with anger. But, since they have entered Myriad Herbs Hall and presented this energy-rotting ghost mushroom too, he said in a flustered and exasperated manner. Zibei did not have the chance to finish his words, because the green-skinned old Taoist casually pointed his finger out and unleashed a green flame. Zibei howled miserably as the green flame hovered around him for a while, burning him alive into ashes. In for a penny, in for a pound, the old Taoist went all out. The green flame flew around the hall for a while, burning a few innkeepers and waiters of Myriad Herbs Hall, as well as a few customers in the room to death. Another old Taoist, clad in a black Taoist robe, casually pointed his finger at the back. Immediately, all the doors of Myriad Herbs Hall were shut with a series of crackling noises. A layer of dark blue phosphorescent flame lingered on the doors. Obviously, he had cast an extremely vicious restrictive spell on the doors. Another old Taoist clad in Taoist robes leaped into a gust of chilly wind and rushed straight up to the second and third floor of Myriad Herbs Hall. In just a blink of an eye, they had killed all the people there, leaving not even their bodies behind. Then, they looted all the medicinal herbs in the storeroom and put them into 7 storage bags. 7 storage bags filled with medicinal herbs were casually thrown on the ground. The green-skinned old Taoist rubbed his palms and said smilingly, "Good. So, shall we follow the old rule?" Wu Qi looked at the 7 heaven immortals around him, took a few steps back cautiously and said, "What old rule?" The green-skinned old Taoist laughed dryly and said, "Energy-rotting ghost mushroom will go to the highest bidder. As for the rest, they will take all the medicinal herbs in Myriad Herbs Hall." The other heaven immortals nodded and agreed with Chi-Chi. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi nodded his head as well. Qing Su Immortal Pass was indeed a deadly place. In just a few breaths of time, every single person in Myriad Herbs Hall was killed. None of these heaven immortals were easy to deal with. But no matter what, Wu Qi was determined to obtain the extremely vicious spirit herb, the energy-rotting ghost mushroom. Chapter 450. In the lobby of Myriad Herbs Hall, Jin Danqi and his brothers were hugging the glinting object tightly, their bodies shivering violently. The old Taoist with a green skin walked up to them with a strange smile on his face. With great difficulty, he squeezed out a smile that could barely be considered as kind, then asked the brothers, "Fellow Taoists, your energy-rotting ghost mushroom is a good item. The people of Myriad Herbs Hall wanted a share of it, but how could there be such a good thing under the heaven? That's why we killed them." The old Taoist cleared his throat and said with a smile, "Don't worry, we are both good people. Hee, but what do you want?" Shivering, the brothers huddled together. The ruthless and merciless slaughter of the few heaven immortals had truly frightened them. The 2 brothers were just worrying about how to avoid the 10,000 Herbs Hall and how to get rid of the entanglement of the 10,000 Herbs Hall so that they could successfully sell the energy-rotting ghost mushroom at a high price, but the entire 10,000 Herbs Hall was slaughtered. This cruel scene directly taught them a lesson. This was the true face of a cultivator. Qing Su Immortal Pass was guarded by a general of the human race, but these heaven immortals were still killing and robbing people, committing such an evil deed in broad daylight. Although the 2 brothers were a little cunning, they were nothing more than some petty tricks. How could they bear the psychological impact when they suddenly saw this kind of bloody murder? When the old Taoist asked them what they wanted, the brothers were stunned for a long while before they finally reacted. The older brother said carefully, "As for immortal items and spirit items, our cultivation base is too shallow, so we dare not to think too much about them. We just want a slightly superior cultivation method and some magic treasures that we can use." The younger brother added hastily, "Energy stones, and the energy stones we need for our cultivation. The more the better. The highest bidder will get them." Wu Qi gave the other 7 heaven immortals a sideways glance. 4 of them had a cultivation base of 36th tier, and 2 of them were 35th tier. The old Taoist with a green skin had the highest cultivation base, as he had barely stepped into the 34th tier. Since they were able to rush to Myriad Herbs Hall after hearing the news, all 7 of them were from the evil path. No cultivator from the righteous path, be it Taoists or monks, would be interested in the energy-rotting ghost mushroom. They were evil cultivators. A cruel smile emerged on Wu Qi's face. The black dragon spirit ring hanging around his neck moved slightly, then spat out a stream of powder from its mouth. It was the powdered drunken dragon incense. Wu Qi's muscles flowed like flowing water, allowing the drunken dragon fragrance to slowly slide down his chest, gradually reaching his navel. Wu Qi's muscles contracted, filling his belly button with a pinch of drunken dragon incense, which looked like a miniature incense burner. The true essence within Wu Qi's body slowly revolved, and a faint trace of true fire appeared in his belly button, slowly burning away the drunken dragon incense. A faint fragrance wafted out from Wu Qi's body. There were large amounts of low-grade herbs in the 10,000 Herb Hall's main hall. The herbs gave off a very strong medicinal smell, so this little fragrance was not noticeable at all. Wu Qi carefully controlled the fragrance, letting it slowly spread out, not letting people inhale too much at once. The green-skinned Taoist chuckled. He patted the younger brother's shoulder in a friendly manner, then asked with a smile, "They are just some energy stones, easy to get. We don't care about them at all." Where did you find this energy-rotting ghost mushroom?" The elder brother answered hastily, "We found this energy-rotting ghost mushroom in Mount Wangue in Pang province of Diyu." Upon hearing that, the green-skinned old Taoist casually patted the elder brother's head with his palm. A weak palm thunder shot out and exploded the elder brother's head into countless drops of blood and gore that sprayed in all directions. Before the younger brother could cry out in shock, the green-skinned old Taoist gave him a backhand slap and exploded his head as well. Clapping his hands happily, the old Taoist grabbed the glowing object and threw it onto the 7 storage bags placed in the center of the main hall. "Alright, now we have the source of this object. If any of you are interested, you can go to Mount Wangue and look for the fortuitous encounter," he said with a smile. Rubbing his palms complacently, the old Taoist smiled and said, "Now, we're going to do things according to the old rules. Apart from these 7 bags of spirit herbs, we'll bid for them separately. The fellow immortal who offers the highest bid will get this energy-rotting ghost mushroom, and the other 7 will share his bid, as well as the 7 bags of spirit herbs. Haha, this energy-rotting ghost mushroom is an upper-tier 5th-grade spirit herb, and it can poison even gold immortals. This treasure is very useful to us." No sooner had the green-skinned old Taoist finished speaking, a middle-aged Taoist clad in a red robe pointed at Wu Qi and said, "Fellow Taoist, please show us some of your skills, so that we can see if you are qualified to do things according to the old rules." The few immortals from the Evil League all fixed their eyes on Wu Qi. They chuckled as Chi-Chi took a step closer to Wu Qi. Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Is this the old rules? When you see a good treasure, you have to kill all those who are not strong enough, and then those who are strong enough will decide the ownership of the treasure according to their bids." The few evil immortals laughed at the same time. They nodded and said, "That's right. That's the rule in Qing Su Immortal Pass." Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh, then chuckled and said in a low voice, "I like this rule. Don't you feel weak all over?" As Wu Qi spoke, 4 36th-tier heaven immortals suddenly fell to the ground without making a sound. The knees of 2 35th-tier heaven immortals turned soft, and they staggered a few steps forward while crying out in terror, "What happened? Our immortal energy. What is that? How did we? The green-skinned old Taoist, who had the highest cultivation base among them, felt his vision turning dark, and his body feeling weak and itchy. The immortal energy in his body had been weakened by more than half, and the cultivation base he could exert now was at most that of a 36th-tier heaven immortal. "What is?" cried the green-skinned old Taoist. With a blink of his body, 4 fiend shadows darted out of Wu Qi's body, leaving numerous afterimages in the air as they soundlessly fused into the bodies of 3 heaven immortals, who could still maintain their sanity. Blood gushed out of their bodies, and the 3 heaven immortals howled miserably at the same time. Suddenly, a crack burst open between their brows, from which 3 immortal souls emanating an immense evil aura transformed into beams of light, attempting to flee. A crystal-clear phoenix cry rang out as the phoenix fire pouch rushed out from between Wu Qi's brows. A stream of purple and green heavenly flame descended from the sky, transforming into a wall of fire that wrapped around the three immortal souls. Wu Qi casually pointed his finger out, and the sword of greedy wolf flew out. Amidst a shrill wolf howl, it pierced through the three immortal souls and killed them completely. The purple and green divine flame burned ragingly, and before long, all 7 heaven immortals had been refined into blood and soul crystals. Quickly, he collected the storage rings of the 7 heaven immortals and looted everything of value from them. After that, Wu Qi walked excitedly to the center of the hall and fished out the glinting object from the bundle. It was indeed an energy-rotting ghost mushroom, a 5th-grade spirit herb in Scroll of Stealing. Combined with some other deadly poisons, it was more than enough to concoct an energy-rotting ghost mushroom that could even kill a gold immortal. The mushroom was about the size of a human head. It was pitch black, soft, and sticky like rotten flesh. It was heavy and probably weighed more than 50 kilograms. Several dozens of mycelium as thick as mung beans grew out of its body, with several dozens of mushroom caps the size of Enia mushrooms hanging from them. The mushroom caps had facial features that looked like those of a human being, but they were twisted and looked extremely ugly and ferocious. Indistinctly, shrill ghost howls could be heard coming from them. It is indeed an energy-rotting ghost mushroom, and one that has devoured the flesh and blood of at least 1 million living beings. Wu Qi breathed out a satisfied sigh. Carefully, he shoved the energy-rotting ghost mushroom into the black dragon spirit ring, then transferred all the medicinal herbs found in the 7 storage bags on the floor to himself. Grinning mockingly, Wu Qi realized that he had suddenly gotten used to the unspoken rule of Qing Su Immortal Pass. To put it bluntly, the one with the bigger fist was the king, and there were no rules at all. Initially, he was planning to spend a huge sum of energy stones and snatch the energy-rotting ghost mushroom from his gold core brother. But, since the old rule of the green-skinned Taoist and the other old Taoists was still in place, why didn't he learn from them and snatch it directly? The energy-rotting ghost mushroom was one of the items that Wu Qi wanted to buy in Qing Su Immortal Pass. Initially, Wu Qi wanted to buy the energy-rotting ghost mushroom, which was more bizarre and unpredictable than the energy-rotting ghost mushroom, as well as a few other poisonous plants. But this kind of deadly poison was extremely rare, and he might not be able to find it. Wu Qi felt that he was very lucky to be able to find an energy-rotting ghost mushroom in such a short period of time. But the garrison medallion of Qing Su Immortal Pass is really just a decoration. Wu Qi laughed mockingly as he retracted the 4 celestial fiend puppets, opened the door and walked out lazily. The commotion caused by the murder and robbery was so intense, yet no one came to investigate. The garrison medallion of Qing Su Immortal Pass had really neglected its duty. Upon stepping out of the main entrance of Myriad Herbs Hall, Wu Qi's expression changed abruptly. He suddenly realized why no one had discovered the unusual change in Myriad Herbs Hall. The sky had turned grayish, and 2 mysterious, scarlet eyeballs were hovering in midair, staring straight at Wu Qi. Under the ground was a vast, sticky, yellow ocean, which was emitting a pungent, fishy smell. The grayish sky and the yellow ocean formed a spherical space that measured 100 miles in diameter, trapping the entire Myriad Herbs Hall within it. A man and a woman were standing quietly on the yellow ocean, staring at Wu Qi with a smile on their faces. Wu Qi halted his steps, lowered his head to look at the yellow ocean under his feet, and said in a deep voice, "The legendary water of the Yellow Spring?" The man laughed and said softly, "It's just an imitation, not the real thing. But, if a heaven immortal accidentally bumps into it, even if he doesn't die, he will at least lose a piece of skin." "Cut the crap," said the woman straightforwardly. "Hand over the energy-rotting ghost mushroom and the benefits you just obtained, as well as all your belongings. We saw Patriarch Greenheart and a few other dead men enter Myriad Herbs Hall with you, and we've worked hard to deploy the illusory realm outside to buy you some time. Even if we don't have any credit, we can still thank you for your hard work. Hand over all your valuables, and we'll spare your life." Wu Qi laughed dryly and said, "Fellow Taoists, what are you trying to do? A robbery?" The woman nodded seriously and said, "That's right. You've been robbing others in Myriad Herbs Hall, and now you're the only one who walked out alone. Now we, husband and wife, are robbing you. This is a matter of course. Cut the crap, our illusory realm can only hold you for a quarter of an hour at most. Quickly hand over all your valuables, and we won't go too far. We'll spare your life, so that we can meet again in the future. For a moment, Wu Qi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had just robbed a group of people, and now he was robbed as soon as he walked out. This was truly a retribution from the heavens. Seeing that Wu Qi didn't move for a long while, the woman couldn't help but widen her eyes and raise her eyebrows. Then she pointed her finger at the two huge eyeballs in the sky. The two scarlet eyeballs spun abruptly, and a large amount of sticky blood sprayed out from them, splashing towards Wu Qi along with a pungent smell. Chapter 451. The blood that sprayed down from the top of his head had a pungent stench. Even from a great distance away, Wu Qi could feel a scorching heat coming from it, which made his skin hurt. The blood was not a good material, so Wu Qi dared not to touch it. Without hesitation, he pointed his finger out and threw out a palm-sized, golden-yellow jade medallion carved into the shape of a rhinoceros, which he snatched from Lord Jade. It transformed into a beam of golden light and flew out. A deep roar of a rhinoceros rang out, as a 90 feet long, stout and muscular single-horned rhinoceros appeared above Wu Qi's head. The rhinoceros licked its lips and lowered its head to look at Wu Qi. After that, it widened its eyes and breathed out a stream of white mist towards the sky. A strong gale was kicked up from all directions, and nearly 100 whirlwinds with goat horns emerged from the ground, reaching into the sky like ghost claws that stretched out from hell. The whirlwinds collided with the blood. The thick and sticky blood was rolled up by the whirlwinds, turning into countless thumb-sized, blood-red water droplets that shot all over the sky. Wu Qi didn't care what the rhinoceros was going to do. He opened his mouth and sprayed out a stream of innate energies of 5 elements onto the rhinoceros's body. The rhinoceros threw its head back and roared joyfully into the sky as if it was in heat. Then, the several dozens of whirlwinds suddenly converged and transformed into a pitch-black whirlwind, about 70 to 80 feet long. It rolled up all the water droplets and shot towards the man and woman. The black whirlwind produced a long, sharp, and unpleasant whistling sound, like the screams of countless malicious spirits. It tore the air apart, leaving dozens of glaring black halos, and suddenly arrived in front of the man and woman. The man screamed in fear. His long robe exploded abruptly, transforming into countless thumb-sized, white strips that shot out in all directions. Within a blink of an eye, they weaved into a huge cloth net, firmly blocking the whirlwind. The diameter of the cloth net was about 1 mile, and its surface was densely covered with the shapes of faint, blood-red eyes. These eyes flashed with a strange evil light from time to time, and their entire bodies were filled with an unsettling evil aura. The whirlwind, along with the blood-colored water droplets, fell heavily on the cloth net. Only an ear-piercing sound could be heard, as if a basin of cold water had been poured into a pot of hot oil. The cloth strips on the cloth net spewed out unpleasant black smoke. The whirlwind disappeared, and the blood droplets were also sucked into the cloth net. The scarlet-red eyes on the cloth strips suddenly deepened. The woman glanced at Wu Qi in surprise. She nodded in a very reserved manner and said with a smile, "You do have some ability." Giggling, the woman pointed at Wu Qi and said, "Generally speaking, the strongest immortals have abundant energy essence. I'm Lady Myriad Miao, a well-known good person in Qingsu Immortal Pass. If this fellow Taoist is willing to donate some of his primordial yang, I won't be willing to destroy a flower." Wu Qi gave Lady Myriad Miao a look of astonishment, then pointed at the man and said with a wry smile, "Isn't he your husband?" The man smiled as usual. Shaking his head, he said, "Wan Miao is my beloved wife. But what does that have to do with you? It's your fortune that she has taken a fancy to you. You just need to donate some of your primordial yang, hand over the energy-rotting ghost mushroom and the herbs you found in Myriad Herbs Hall, and we'll let you leave safely." Blinking his eyes, Wu Qi shook his head and thought, "This couple is really one of a kind." Grinning coldly, Wu Qi fished out about 1/2 kilogram of drunken dragon incense powder. Casually, he sprinkled a handful of it into the air, then snapped, "An ugly woman like you wants to take advantage of me? Do you think you are you, that guy? Have a taste of my bone-rotting ghost fire." He pointed his finger out and unleashed a stream of true flame. The drunken dragon incense powder that filled the air was ignited instantly, transforming into countless sparks that rushed towards the man and woman. The air was filled with a delicate fragrance, and the sparks were swirling about, giving off the smell of phosphorescence. When Lady Myriad Meow saw that Wu Qi did not respond to her suggestion, it was as if Wu Qi had just trampled on her dignity as a woman. She was so angry that she let out a shrill howl. Suddenly, her long hair stood straight up, and her body transformed into a pale green, half-transparent ghost, charging towards Wu Qi amidst countless ghost flames. She laughed harshly and said, "Phosphorescence? Is there any phosphorescence under the heaven that can hurt us, who are already ghosts?" Wu Qi's expression flickered abruptly. This Lady Myriad Meow was actually a ghost immortal cultivated from a ghost spirit? Different from the heavenly ghosts in the ghost realm, ghost immortals cultivated from incorporeal ghosts. Ghost immortals cultivated by drawing nether energy into their bodies. Their cultivation techniques were unpredictable, and they were famous for their danger, strangeness, fierceness, and strangeness. They were experts in hurting the souls of immortal cultivators, and their curses were impossible to guard against. They were especially good at using poisons. To other immortals, the energy-rotting ghost mushroom was a deadly poison, but to ghost immortals, it was just like the Ganoderma horse, a supreme spirit herb that could improve their cultivation base and strengthen their ghost bodies. No wonder this couple was blocking the entrance of Myriad Herbs Hall, determined to rob the energy-rotting ghost mushroom. Wu Qi snorted coldly, fixing his gaze at Lady Myriad Meow, who was charging towards him. When she was about 1 mile away from him, Wu Qi pointed his finger out, unleashing a fist-sized ball of purple and green flame, shooting towards Lady Myriad Meow like a bolt of lightning. Lady Myriad Meow had just flown past the burning drunken dragon incense powder, and her body was not harmed at all. She thought that Wu Qi was nothing special, and did not even spare a glance at the ball of divine flame of order that flew out from Wu Qi's hand. When the innate divine flame was not activated, its power was extremely restrained, as all its magical power was hidden in its core. Even when one used their divine will to scan through it, they would not be able to sense its frightening power. Lady Myriad Meow had never seen such an innate supreme treasure before. With a hideous smile on her face, as if she had the power to decide life and death, she plunged straight into the ball of divine flame of order like a moth flying into a flame. Poor Lady Myriad Meow, a ghost immortal with a cultivation base of nearly 31st tier, was completely restrained by the divine flame of order. The divine flame of order was the nemesis of all fiends and ghosts, and the natural enemy of all pure spiritual entities. As ghost immortals were cultivated from ghosts, their immortal bodies were different from ordinary heaven immortals, as their bodies were formed from the combination of nether energy and their own soul will. A miserable howl echoed out as Lady Myriad Meow's body burst into flames, dancing wildly in the air like an extra-large torch. The divine flame of order clung to her body and burned to its heart's content, then seeped into her body through her 7 apertures, causing dark smoke to billow out from her body. Numerous purple crystals the size of fists kept bursting out from her body. They were the soul crystals formed from the enormous soul will she had cultivated painstakingly for countless years. The man was struck dumb. He stared blankly at Lady Myriad Meow, who was shrouded in the purple and green divine flame, and screamed, "What the hell is this?" "You don't need to know," Wu Qi said coolly. "A ghost immortal? Hee hee, the thing I fear the least is a ghost immortal." A bird cry rang out as the immortal sword given to Wu Qi by Taoist Yunzong shot out amidst a sheet of flame. When the immortal sword flew out, the flame condensed into a large bird that looked like a phoenix. The flame flickered, and Lady Myriad Meow, who was severely wounded by the divine flame of order, was killed by the immortal sword without any ability to resist. Drop by drop, her enormous soul will essence was purified and refined by the divine flame of order. Eventually, Wu Qi obtained over 3,000 fist-sized soul pearls. With a flick of his sleeve, the soul pearls transformed into a purple beam of light and were put away by Wu Qi, together with the storage ring left behind by Lady Myriad Miao. With the immortal sword in hand, the single-horned rhino hovering above Wu Qi threw its head back and let out a long roar. Pointing at the man, he cried out sternly, "Now I'll rob you. Leave behind all your valuables, and I'll spare your life." The man took a few steps back in terror. Lady Myriad Miao was his partner, and she had always been the one in charge of their actions, as her cultivation base was 4 tiers higher than the man. The man was merely a peak 35th tier cultivator, and with the drunken dragon incense lingering in the air, his cultivation base had been greatly weakened, leaving him with a cultivation base of 36th tier. Holding the immortal sword, Wu Qi approached step by step with a hideous smile on his face. He pointed at the yellow ocean down below and said, "An imitation of the water of Yellow Spring? This treasure is not bad, I want it too. Leave behind all your valuables, and I'll leave you with a pair of underpants to take you home. Hurry up and hand over all your valuables, or I won't even leave you with a pair of underpants." The man looked around in panic for a while. All of a sudden he roared out, "Wan Miao is dead. What's the point of me being alive? Let's fight, let's fight. Can you kill my infinite incarnations?" The man's clothes ripped apart at the same time, revealing his body. Wu Qi let out a strange cry with fright, then quickly retreated far away. This man's facial features were extremely good. He was also a pretty boy, and he was handsome and romantic. However, the rest of his body below the neck was in a terrible state. His flesh was rotten to the point where white bones could be seen everywhere. His body was rotten to the point where shredded flesh and minced meat could be seen everywhere. Countless thumb-sized maggots were crawling in and out of his rotten flesh and bones. However, they were covered in a thick layer of black carapace, and their bellies were covered with black hair. "What the hell is this?" Wu Qi cried out in fear. Throughout his life of cultivation, Wu Qi had never thought that a heaven immortal cultivator could have such a horrible appearance. Not only was the man's body rotten, he was also emitting a foul stench. Even from afar, the stench made Wu Qi burst into tears. "Bone rotting and burying worms." The man laughed ferociously and said, "These are Wan Miao's favorite bone rotting and burying worms. For her sake, I destroyed my own immortal body, using my heaven immortal body to transform into a nest of worms, raising 3,600 of them for Wan Miao. These are the bone-rotting and burying worms that can devour gold immortals when they finally mature." Waving both arms, the man cried out sternly, "My boys, kill him and eat him. Wan Miao, I'll avenge you." Bone-rotting and burying worms? Immediately, Wu Qi recalled some records about bone-rotting and burying worms found in Scroll of Stealing. Among all the countless venomous worms in the universe, they were frightening creatures that could be ranked in the top 100. In order to grow and evolve, these venomous worms had to constantly devour the flesh and blood of heaven immortals. If they did not eat fresh flesh and blood for 3 days in a row, they would immediately die. After devouring enough heaven immortals' blood essence, flesh and blood, they would spin a cocoon and evolve. They had to evolve 9 times in total. Once the number of bone-rotting and burying worms reached a certain level, they would have the overall strength to devour gold immortals. Most importantly, even the most basic larva, the feces of these worms, was an extremely venomous poison. If they were combined with the energy-rotting ghost mushroom and 5 other rare poisonous plants and insects as raw materials, they would be able to concoct the immortal banishing powder, which could kill even a mid-tier gold immortal in an instant. A loud noise rang out, as 3,600 bone-rotting and burying worms darted out of the man's body like countless bullets. Densely packed together, they swarmed toward Wu Qi, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Wu Qi's face fell, and he retreated a few miles back. Chapter 452. The black dragon spirit ring moved. The dragon head on the ring opened its mouth and spat out several dozens of palm-sized, golden-colored leaves that were emitting a pungent odor. The leaves were very thick, and the veins on them were very distinct. Each and every one of them formed a huge character, ghost, written in ancient seal script. It was the ghost pattern grass, a strange herb Wu Qi had collected on Myriad Immortals' planet. Clenching the ghost pattern grass tightly with both hands, he crushed it into powder. After that, Wu Qi bit the tip of his tongue and sprayed out a mouthful of blood, fusing it with the broken leaves of the ghost pattern grass. Upon contact with the blood, the golden-colored ghost pattern grass began to melt, turning into a clump of sticky, pale red liquid. The pungent odor was gone, replaced by a faint fragrance that could make one feel refreshed. Bone rotting and burying bugs, what a good thing. Wu Qi's eyes shone brightly. With the liquid of ghost pattern grass sticking on his finger, he quickly wrote one large rune after another in the air. The liquid of ghost pattern grass was very sticky, and as it flowed in the air, it formed into twisted runes that were blinking with a blinding red gleam. When all 49 runes were written, Wu Qi pushed his palm on them and began to recite an incantation under his breath. Immediately, a grayish mist rose from the surroundings, and a chilly wind that brought countless twisted faces, crying and wailing, gathered towards the runes. In just a blink of an eye, the runes were covered with a thick layer of murderous aura of Een ghosts. A towering aura soared into the sky, and those bone-rotting and burying bugs that were leaping towards Wu Qi were taken aback. Then, they rushed towards the runes as if they had gone mad. Like nibbling on mulberry leaves, these bone-rotting and burying bugs crazily devoured the runes transformed from the liquid of ghost pattern grass, devouring all the liquid that had fused with Wu Qi's blood essence and all the murderous aura of Een ghosts. Wu Qi stared at the stunned man in front of him, smiled and said, "Actually, it is not necessary to feed these bone-rotting and burying bugs with the flesh and blood of heaven immortals." Although the bone-rotting corpse insects raised this way had a stronger evil aura and greater lethality. However, if we only need their excrement to concoct various poisons, then if we feed them with ghost pattern grass, ghost face flower, and weeping ghost mushroom mixed with their own blood essence, the toxicity of their excrement will be several times stronger. The man trembled as he pointed at Wu Qi, his mind completely blank. After a long time, the man shouted at the top of his lungs, "Impossible, these are bone-corroding and undead insects that I raised with my blood essence, they should only listen to my orders." "Idiot!" Wu Qi sneered and shook his head. "How can you heaven immortals who practice evil cultivation techniques know the secret of such a vicious thing as bone-rotting and undead worms? If not for Princess Zhonglu inheriting the bloodline of an ancient heaven god from her mother, from which she obtained countless inheritances of evil ghost techniques, how could Wu Qi know the method of feeding bone-rotting and undead insects with ghost pattern grass and some other poisonous things? After feeding them with the flesh and blood of heaven immortals, after spinning the cocoon for 9 times, they would give birth to a matured bone-rotting and undead insect king, which possessed a frightening strength that could devour gold immortals. However, after carefully feeding them with various poisonous things mixed with their own blood essence, after spinning the cocoon for 9 times, they would give birth to a myriad poison-venomous insect king, which could kill a gold immortal with just a mouthful of its saliva. It was a truly vicious thing. If the bone-rotting and undead insect king was driven to fight against a gold immortal, and if that gold immortal had some supreme treasure with pure yang element, the bone-rotting and undead insect king would be smashed to pieces. But, as long as the myriad poison-venomous insect king had a clever technique, it could produce an endless stream of deadly poison, and how many immortals could it kill? Looking at the hysterical man, Wu Qi was too lazy to discuss these profound questions with him. For shadowy figures rushed out of his body. 4 celestial fiend puppets flew whistling out, charging towards the man who had fallen into madness. 4 fiend figures wheeled around the man, and in the blink of an eye, his body was smashed into a pile of broken bones and rotten flesh. Just when a bloody immortal soul rushed out from his body, it was devoured by the 4 celestial fiend puppets. Wu Qi shook his head as he stared coldly at the man's flesh and blood drifting in the air. The man's appearance was so disgusting that Wu Qi did not even have the thought to refine him into a blood crystal or soul crystal. Thus, he decided to let the celestial fiend puppets share him. With a light shake of his fingers, streams of runes emanating an eerie aura were cast out. Using the technique taught to him by Princess Zhonglu, Wu Qi sent a thread of his divine will into each of the 3,600 bone-rotting and undead bugs, firmly controlling their limited intelligence, which was left with only a tiny bit of instinct to devour and avariciousness. Wu Qi took out a spirit-breeding ring, which had an internal space of only the size of a water tank. Using all the materials he obtained from Myriad Immortals' planet, he expanded it to the size of 10 acres. After that, he threw in a large pile of energy stones to replenish the energy in the internal space, as well as several tens of thousands of kilograms of poisonous herbs and animals he found on Myriad Immortals' planet. After that, he ordered all the bone-rotting and undead bugs to crawl into the spirit-breeding ring and settle down inside. Bone-rotting and undead bugs were too vicious. Even though they were larvae that had not spun their cocoons yet, Wu Qi dared not to put them together with longbow people. Those longbow people were careless, and if they accidentally bumped into these bugs, even though Wu Qi had controlled their intelligence, their poisonous hair could still kill these longbow people who were merely at Jindan realm. He hung the spirit-breeding ring in front of his chest, turned his head around and gave his surroundings a glance. He retracted the single-horned rhino, pointed his finger out and took out the dark Yin energy vase. As soon as the vase was taken out, the imitation of the yellow spring under his feet began to vibrate violently. Wu Qi performed an incantation gesture, and the vase immediately shot out a beam of green light. A vast expanse of yellow ocean rolled up and slowly condensed into 3 thumb-sized, translucent drops of yellow liquid at the mouth of the vase. It was the true form of the yellow ocean. It was a vicious thing that Goddess Wan Miao had concocted by gathering countless acquired poisonous creatures and a huge amount of death aura from ancient tombs, fusing with countless deadly poisons from rotting corpses, and using the 3 drops of true water of transformation that she found by chance. But she only had 3 drops of true water of transformation. Therefore, although the yellow spring was vicious, its power was not too great. It could threaten lower-tier heaven immortals, but it would be useless against immortal items with stronger defense. But I have as much true water of transformation as I want. After identifying the essence of the 3 drops of yellow spring with his divine will, Wu Qi smiled delightfully. After shoving a pile of water element energy stones into the vase, Wu Qi changed the incantation gesture and produced several tens of kilograms of true water of transformation, fusing it with the 3 drops of yellow spring. Drops of clear spring water flew out from the mouth of the vase and slowly fused with the 3 drops of yellow spring water. Slowly, the volume of the yellow spring water grew larger, and its color turned fainter. But as time went by, the yellow color grew stronger. Very good. This goddess Wan Miao is pretty good at concocting poisons. What she concocted is actually a living poison. As long as the true water of transformation is added, the yellow spring water will grow endlessly. This is indeed a good stuff. Wu Qi looked pleasantly at the clump of yellow spring water, which was the size of a water tank, on the mouth of the vase. He nodded his head and said, "I can't use too much of this thing, or it will ruin my reputation. In the future, I will slowly fuse all kinds of deadly poisons into it, and slowly accumulate the true water of transformation, making it stronger and stronger. In the end, when I unleash it, it will turn into a vast ocean, and even a gold immortal will have to knock him out for a few times." Laughing complacently, Wu Qi kept the clump of yellow spring water into the dark Yin energy vase. After that, he took a deep breath and changed his visage, retracting the 4 celestial fiend puppets into his body. After that, he broke the illusory barrier erected by Goddess Wan Miao with a punch and walked out leisurely. Right after he walked out of the illusory barrier and arrived at Qing Su Immortal Square, Wu Qi was taken aback. There were no pedestrians on the street, and all the shops in the surroundings had their doors tightly shut. Only several dozens of heaven immortals could be seen standing on clouds, looking at him from afar. 100 flying ships, each about 200 feet long, were hovering quietly in the sky. 20,000 soldiers clad in soft armors were standing on the ships, pulling their bows and aiming at Wu Qi. A handsome young man, clad in a crimson battle robe with 100 flowers on the outside, was riding on the back of a single-horned ink qilin, with a 36-jointed steel whip hanging on his left hand. He was standing on the street outside Myriad Herbs Hall's main entrance, staring at Wu Qi. Upon seeing such a solemn and battle-ready stance, Wu Qi laughed dryly and said, "What is the meaning of this, General?" "I'm Feng Qingya, the general who guards Qing Su Immortal Pass," the young general said coolly. "I'm Feng Qingya, the general who guards Qing Su Immortal Pass. Just hand over the energy-rotting ghost mushroom and all the valuables you have, and let me whip you 3 times. If you survive, you can leave now." It suddenly dawned on Wu Qi that they were not the only people who came to this place after hearing the energy-rotting ghost mushrooms cry just now. And it seemed to him that Feng Qingya, the tiger sitting on the ground, was following behind Goddess Wan Miao and her husband. Wu Qi laughed dryly, then turned to Feng Qingya and said, "So, General Feng, you are trying to rob me?" Feng Qingya chuckled. As a man, he was actually smiling in such a flirtatious manner, and was just short of throwing a flirtatious glance at Wu Qi. Waving the steel whip in his left hand, he said coolly, "I'm not robbing you. I'm trying to maintain the order in Qing Su Immortal Pass. Of course, you can think that if you want. If you sell the energy-rotting ghost mushroom in the ghost realm, you can exchange it for tens of millions of energy stones, gold, silver, and gemstones. I've been spending quite a lot lately." Frowning, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, "By doing this, General Feng, aren't you afraid that?" Feng Qingya interrupted Wu Qi and snapped, "Cut the crap. Don't talk nonsense about rules to me. Rules? In Qing Su Immortal Pass, my words are the rules. Laws? Every word I say is the law of Qing Su Immortal Pass. As long as your overall strength is not strong enough to scare me, I don't mind killing people and robbing them on the street." Pointing the steel whip at Wu Qi, Feng Qingya cried out sternly, "My boys, the murder case of Myriad Herbs Hall. Over 3,800 innocent people were slaughtered by this guy. Capture him alive. I'm going to chop him into pieces to serve as an example to others." 4 soldiers on the flying ship answered with a loud voice. They put down the strong bows in their hands and leaped down from the sky 1,000 feet above the ground like fleas, pouncing towards Wu Qi. Although they did not sense any aura around them, nor did they possess any beast souls, they moved as fast as a gust of wind, not any slower than those nascent soul cultivators who were body cultivators. Wu Qi was taken aback by the speed of the 4 soldiers. With just a moment of carelessness, they had arrived before him, stretched out both hands and grabbed onto Wu Qi's limbs. Like iron hoops, their fingers gripped tightly onto Wu Qi's body. The 4 soldiers exhaled and yelled, then grabbed Wu Qi's limbs and pulled them out forcefully. They were not trying to capture Wu Qi alive. Instead, it was obvious that they were going to tear Wu Qi into pieces. Chapter 453. With a light snort, Wu Qi's body shook, and a ring of grayish cold air flashed across his skin. The 4 soldiers who grabbed his limbs howled miserably as they were first knocked flying away by a tremendous force, and then a bone-piercing cold air rushed into their bodies. In just a blink of an eye, they were frozen into 4 clumps of xianbing. The tremendous force sent them flying far away, smashing into a shop on the roadside and shattering their frozen bodies. Stretching his limbs, Wu Qi frowned. The 4 soldiers who grabbed his body just now did not cultivate their nascent divinity or magic power, nor did they practice body cultivation techniques like the monks of Buddhist League or immortals who cultivated their fleshly bodies to achieve immortality. It seemed that they had another technique to temper their fleshly bodies. Although they did not emanate any energy aura, the strength of their fleshly bodies was definitely comparable to that of nascent soul cultivators who specialized in body cultivation. Wu Qi could smell a faint scent of herbs from their bodies. He reckoned that they must have a special technique to temper their fleshly bodies, and that was why they had such strong fleshly bodies. If that was the case, there was a reason why the cultivators of Qingsu Immortal Pass were so fearful of these soldiers of Yu Dynasty. An army of 100,000 was stationed in Qingsu Immortal Pass, which was equivalent to 100,000 body cultivators who specialized in body tempering. Coupled with some special weapons, it was a force that no ordinary cultivators would dare to provoke. But, according to the news that Yu Hehuan told him, every single soldier of Yu Dynasty stationed in outer heavenly realms had fused with beast souls, which gave them a strange strength that was comparable to cultivators. It was reasonable, as outer heavenly realms were under the control of the celestial court, where countless immortals and cultivators lived. If the soldiers of Yu Dynasty were not well equipped, they would have long been wiped out by the cultivators from the Evil League and Fiend League. The number of human soldiers on Pangu continent who had fused with beast souls was not too many, but they had such a strange technique to temper their fleshly bodies, and together with their huge numbers, even the celestial court could not do anything to them. Thousands of thoughts raced in Wu Qi's mind, and he quickly figured out some of the key points. Meanwhile, Feng Qingya laughed with surprise and said, "Not bad, not bad. You are indeed not an ordinary nascent soul cultivator." Feng Qingya's eyes rested on the iron medallion hanging on Wu Qi's waist. Noticing his gaze, Wu Qi pulled off the small iron medallion and placed it in his palm. "You mean there's something strange in this thing?" Nodding seriously, Feng Qingya said frankly, "Those who carry this iron medallion are people who deserve our careful treatment." How should he put it? With this iron plate, it at least proved that you had enough financial resources. You're merely a peak nascent soul stage cultivator, yet you're able to pay an additional fee of spirit stones. Your background and net worth are worthy of our attention. Wu Qi suddenly realized the mystery behind it, and he immediately cursed Feng Qingya in his mind. The complacent Feng Qingya could not hear the curses in Wu Qi's mind. "This is an invention I invented after I came here. Any cultivator who comes to Qingsu Immortal Pass for the first time, and whose cultivation base is not strong, but whose expression does not change after being charged an extra fee of energy stones will be given an iron medallion like this. If it is a cultivator with a small net worth, but whose cultivation base is not strong." Wu Qi laughed as well. Staring at Feng Qingya, he said, "They will disappear very soon, right?" Feng Qingya shook his head and said smilingly, "Perhaps, but it has nothing to do with me. How should I put this? You cultivators are killing for money, and it has nothing to do with me. I'm just waiting for the dust to settle, and then I'll come and uphold justice." As he spoke, Feng Qingya's face suddenly turned cold. Pointing a finger at Wu Qi, he cried out sternly, "Boys, kill him. This man is a lunatic who has killed over 18,000 cultivators and prisoners around Myriad Herbs Hall. He has committed a heinous crime, and his crime is unforgivable. In accordance with the law of Diyu, I'll kill him on the spot." 100 soldiers on the 4 flying ships released their bowstrings at the same time. A muffled noise echoed out as 100 specially made bone-piercing wolf-fang arrows transformed into specks of cold light that crossed several miles in just a blink of an eye, shooting straight towards all the vital parts of Wu Qi's body. These arrows were extremely accurate, fast, and ruthless, as they nearly hit all the vital parts of Wu Qi's body that were exposed to the outside world. Wu Qi dared not to recklessly test the power of these arrows. With a thought in his mind, he activated the defensive spirit item, Green Cicada Wings, once again. Amidst the jarring chirping of cicadas, a large sheet of green light enveloped Wu Qi, while several dozens of green spirit cicadas wheeled around Wu Qi. A heavy pressure suddenly came pressing at him from all directions. When the arrows landed on the defensive green light, the cold light they emitted penetrated nearly 1 foot deep into the green light. Wu Qi watched helplessly as 100 arrows approached him from all directions. The speed of the arrows gradually slowed down, and when they were about 3 inches away from his body, their force was finally neutralized by the green cicada wings, causing them to fall powerlessly to the ground. Wonderful! This is an excellent defensive spirit item. Feng Qingya clapped his hands and cried out, "It is at least a lower-grade spirit item. The price is 3,000 upper-grade energy stones. Is there anyone interested?" Standing on a white cloud in the distance, a middle-aged Taoist with a fair face and no facial hair cried out in a deep voice, "General Feng, this spirit item is full of spirituality, and its defensive strength is pretty good as well. I've recently taken in a few outer sect disciples, and I happen to lack some defensive items. 3,000 upper-grade energy stones is too expensive. 2,700, I'll take it." Feng Qingya raised his steel whip and drew a circle in the air complacently, then said smilingly, "Wonderful. 2,700 upper-grade energy stones. This spirit item belongs to this senior immortal." He pointed at Wu Qi smilingly and said, "Fellow Taoist greed, what other treasures do you have? Take them out now. After all, I have no use for these treasures, but the senior immortals who are waiting in the surroundings can use them." Wu Qi was so infuriated that his mouth twisted. Did this bastard think that his magical treasures were already in his possession? Wu Qi gave those heaven immortals who were watching the show a cold glance, and kept their faces firmly in his mind. So, Qing Su Immortal Pass was such a hellish place? There was no order at all, and it was a place where only the strong could win? In the memories of Shui Xin and Shui Yi, they seemed to think that this place was not bad. Perhaps it was because Green City was too powerful, and no one dared to offend them? Grinning coldly, Wu Qi glared at Feng Qingya and said coldly, "General Feng, you even know my registered Taoist name?" Pointing at the iron medallion in Wu Qi's palm, Feng Qingya said smilingly, "With this, you'll know everything you need to know." With a casual pinch, Wu Qi turned the iron medallion into a drop of molten iron and fell to the ground. Shaking his head, he stamped his foot and unleashed a stream of yellow mist. He was about to flee with the escape art of earth. But his body froze, and he nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. Suddenly he realized that the ground here was paved with energy-repelling iron, which could isolate all natural energies from the surroundings. He dared not to reveal his innate escape art of earth in front of the crowd, so he used an ordinary escape art instead. The result was as if he had bumped his head into a wall, and the backlash from his energy made Wu Qi feel very uncomfortable. Feng Qingya laughed so hard that he nearly fell off the single-horn Qilin's back. "The energy-repelling iron here is 1 mile deep, and you want to flee with the escape art of earth? Fellow Taoist greed, are you scared out of your wits? Ha!" With a cold snort, Wu Qi's body flashed and he teleported away. But suddenly, a loud noise rang out. Wu Qi had just traveled less than 1 mile when a golden immortal talisman suddenly flew up into the sky, sprinkling down with a sheet of golden spirit light. The surrounding void was completely locked down, and with the strength of Wu Qi's current magic power, there was no way he could break through the spirit light sprinkled down by the immortal talisman. The space around him had solidified like an iron bucket, and Wu Qi was like an insect trapped in amber, unable to escape. The person who produced the immortal talisman was a middle-aged Taoist with a big beard. He smiled faintly and said, "Fellow Taoist, since you've come to Qing Su Immortal Pass, you'll have to follow the rules of Qing Su Immortal Pass. Either you tell me the background of your sect, or you show me a few decent immortal spells and divine abilities. Otherwise, hand over all your spirit items and leave." Feng Qingya clapped his hands and praised, "Immortal Master, your timing is very timely. Wonderful. I'll give you a 95% discount on anything that Immortal Master has his eyes on today. All Immortal Masters, pay attention. Don't let this man escape. He has at least an energy-rotting ghost mushroom with him now. Even Patriarch Greenheart and the others were killed by Myriad Herb's Hull, so this man must have many good items with him." As his teleportation was forcibly interrupted, the energies in Wu Qi's body rebelled once again. After stabilizing his energies with great difficulty, Wu Qi could not help but get angry when he heard Feng Qingya's words. According to General Feng, as long as one possesses a sufficient overall strength, they will be able to do whatever they want in Qing Su Immortal Pass. "Since I've killed Patriarch Greenheart, why are you still making things difficult for me?" Feng Qingya blinked his eyes a few times, then rode up to Wu Qi and said smilingly, The problem is, no one saw if fellow Taoist Greed really killed Patriarch Greenheart with his own hands. Unless fellow Taoist Greed can show me your overall strength, so that I won't covet your treasures again, I hope fellow Taoist will hand over all your spirit items. Pointing at the 4 soldiers killed by Wu Qi just now, Feng Qingya said with a faint smile, 4 of my sons are dead. Fellow Taoist, you will have to pay for their bereavement. It has cost the imperial court of Diyu a great amount of financial and material resources to train them, so the cost can be considered as yours. After a brief calculation with his fingers, Feng Qingya smiled and said, Fellow Taoist, you can just compensate me with 1,000 upper-grade energy stones for my 4 sons. I'm not a man who goes too far. The group of several dozens of heaven immortals took a few steps closer to Wu Qi while smiling. Judging from the aura emanating from Wu Qi, he clearly possessed a cultivation base of peak-stage nascent soul realm. However, as a nascent soul cultivator was able to perform teleportation, Wu Qi's background must not be simple. Or he simply had the help of a strange magic treasure on him, and it was the magic treasure that allowed him to display the magical power of teleportation. As magical treasures such as these were very rare, all the heaven immortals were tempted. The bearded Taoist, who had interrupted Wu Qi's teleportation with an immortal talisman, cried out sternly, General Feng, stop wasting time. Just strike now. I don't care what his background is, let's join hands and strip him naked first. Feng Qingya smiled faintly as he swung the steel whip in his hand towards Wu Qi. He laughed and said, You can't blame me for that. You can only blame your bad luck, fellow Taoist. The steel whip was piercingly cold. When Wu Qi scanned it with his divine will, his heart sank immediately. It did not have any fancy features, and there were no divine abilities or restrictive spells attached to it. It was just extremely tough and heavy. The weight of the 36 sections of the whip alone weighed 360,000 kilograms. On top of that, Feng Qingya's brute force was very strong. If an ordinary heaven immortal was hit by it, his immortal body would have his bones and tendons broken. This Qing Su immortal pass is really full of fucking robbers and bandits. Wu Qi roared furiously as a gray light shot out from the top of his head. It was the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. Chapter 454. The Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield emitted several dozens of golden specks of light that blocked the steel whip. When the golden specks merged together, they formed a dragon scale-shaped shield. A loud bang rang out as the steel mace bounced back, and the golden dragon scale shield was shattered into pieces, turning into dozens of golden specks that shot straight toward Feng Qingya's chest. Feng Qingya shrieked with fear. His body tensed up abruptly, and he sprung up into the air like a giant grasshopper. Wu Qi grabbed the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag at the right time, injecting his energy into it without any reservation. He even bit his tongue and sprayed out a mouthful of blood essence onto the flag, causing it to emit a large sheet of misty gleam. Gripping the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, Ji Hao swung it fiercely and generated a series of cracking noise that sounded like a heavy rain. All human warriors and commanders on the 100 flying ships showed the whites of their eyes and fell off the ships in embarrassment. As human soldiers did not cultivate their nascent divinity and magical power, although their fleshly bodies were as strong as body cultivators, their souls were no different from mortals. Even an ordinary soul-searching magical treasure was enough to cause great harm to human soldiers, not to mention a powerful immortal artifact like the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. Unless someone like the great oracles of Yu Dynasty's Directorate of Celestials had laid down a powerful restrictive spell to protect the souls of human soldiers, any mystic technique that targeted at souls was more than enough to severely injure a human army in a flash. On the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, countless jade-like skulls roared together. Their shrill screams even shattered the souls of the 20,000 human warriors in the surroundings. Their broken souls transformed into streams of light, surging out from their eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, then being absorbed by the flag. The flag shone brightly, emanating an enormous soul pressure that made all the living beings in Qingsu Immortal Square shiver and dare not to move. 20,000 soldiers were killed in an instant. Their bodies fell to the ground as they lost control of the bows in their hands, causing 20,000 arrows to fill the sky. Some of the arrows even went straight towards the dozens of heaven immortals standing on the clouds. Sheets of immortal light rushed out of their bodies, turning all the arrows into nothingness in just a flash. Strange whistling noises came from the soul-searching flag, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. Among the several tens of heaven immortals, a dozen of them did not have a very high-grade defensive immortal item, and their cultivation base was just SOSO. The strange whistling sound swept across, and their celestial artifacts suddenly dimmed. The artifact spirits of the celestial artifacts were shattered by the whistling sound. A stream of light rushed out from the immortal artifact. The artifact spirit's immortal soul was shattered and absorbed into the soul-searching flag. The heaven immortal, who had lost the protection of his immortal item, let out a cry of alarm and fell down from the cloud. Before these heaven immortals could fall to the ground, the spirit-restricting rope transformed into a beam of purple light and shot out. The dozens of heaven immortals who fell to the ground were tightly bound by the spirit-restricting rope. With a flick of his finger, these heaven immortals were sucked to the front of Wu Qi. Then he waved the soul-searching flag, unleashing a layer of grayish mist that wrapped up the tens of heaven immortals. Shrill cries rang out as Wu Qi dared not to use the divine flame of order to refine their immortal souls and bodies in front of so many people. Therefore, he had no choice but to suck their immortal souls into the flag, which would be a great boon to the item spirit who was slumbering in the flag. Amidst a dark beam, the sword of greedy wolf shot out. 21 pitch-black wolf heads, each the size of a water tank, transformed into dark beams and spun wildly in the sky. The dark beams swept past the fallen human soldiers, turning them into a rain of blood and flesh that splashed in all directions. The rude and unreasonable behavior of Feng Qingya had greatly infuriated Wu Qi. However, he could not care less and simply killed these human soldiers. Sword beams shot out and shredded the 20,000 human soldiers who fell from the sky in just a blink of an eye. The sword of greedy wolf spun around and came next to Wu Qi, easily piercing through the bodies of the dozens of heaven immortals. Their blood essence was completely absorbed by the sword, leaving not a single drop behind. The item spirit of the sword of greedy wolf let out a long and joyful cry. Wu Qi could clearly sense that the item spirit was growing at an incredible speed, and vaguely showed a sign of breaking through the realm of spirit immortal. Feng Qingya, who had just leaped up from the back of the single-horned Qilin, was hit by the strange cry of the soul-searching flag. His body turned stiff, and he could no longer move freely. Several dozens of dragon-scale-shaped golden beams shot out amidst ear-splitting whistling noises, piercing through his chest. His armor was extremely thick and heavy, possessing a very strong defensive strength. However, when faced with the dragon-scale-shaped golden beams mixed with innate earth element energy essence, the armor was easily pierced through, and a large hole was opened up on his chest. All his internal organs were shredded to pieces by the sharp energy carried by the dragon-scale-shaped golden beams. The fleshly body of the human general shattered, and his soul left his body immediately. Feng Qingya's soul was stronger than ordinary human soldiers, but there was a limit to it. The soul-searching flag rolled up and sucked Feng Qingya's soul into it, turning it into the nourishment for the slumbering item spirit to recover itself. Pressing his palm on Feng Qingya's corpse, Wu Qi uttered a disintegration spell. Abruptly, the corpse disintegrated, turning into the tiniest molecular structure and falling to the ground. A brocade bag fell down from the corpse. Wu Qi snatched it over, inside of which was a large pile of talismans made from bone fragments. Each talisman emanated a very powerful aura, and their power was not weaker than ordinary immortal talismans. All these talismans were recorded in the Tao of Ghost and Deity inherited by Princess Zhanglu. Wu Qi hastily identified the functions of these talismans. Some could attack, some could defend, and some could stabilize one's mind and soul. Among them were a dozen huge bone talismans the size of a door. Judging from the complicated rune arrays carved on them, they were powerful battle-grade talismans that could be used by several tens of thousands of soldiers. Fool! Wu Qi could not help but scold with a smile. With the protection of these strange bone talismans crafted by the great oracles of the human race, if Feng Qingya had taken precautions beforehand, even the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag would not be able to harm him. If he had used one or two of these huge bone talismans beforehand, the overall strength of these 20,000 human soldiers would have been improved by at least 10 times. When faced with 20,000 nascent soul body cultivators whose overall strength had been improved by 10 times, even a true heaven immortal would be terrified. On top of that, with the magical power of stabilizing one's mind and soul, Wu Qi estimated the power of these bone talismans. Once these huge bone talismans were used on these 20,000 human soldiers, perhaps even the soul-searching flag would not be able to take away their souls. Feng Qingya had only been thinking about robbing and had set off without any preparation. You think robbing people was too easy for you? Do you really think no one dares to attack you? Wu Qi sneered mockingly, then suddenly raised his head to look at those heaven immortals who were struggling to resist the power of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. A strange long cry rang out, as the single-horned Qilin mounted by Feng Qingya gave a furious roar and thrust its horn straight towards Wu Qi's chest. How presumptuous! Wu Qi bellowed furiously. You look like a Qilin, but you only have a single horn. I wonder where you came from. Are you going to risk your life for this Feng Qingya? The gold ingot, which he had just refined and purified with the spirit light of immortal transformation, flew out of his hand, transforming into a huge ball of golden light and smashing onto the single-horned Qilin's nose. A crisp thud rang out. The Qilin's face was dented by the gold ingot, and half of its head was smashed into pieces of bone and flesh. Qilin was a divine beast of heaven and earth. Even though it was a mixed-blood descendant, its life force was extremely tenacious. The single-horned Qilin gave a miserable howl. Suddenly, a large plume of dark smoke rushed out from under its feet, carrying it as it spun and fled. Wu Qi gave a cold snort. The spirit-restricting rope flew out and bound the big fellow tightly. A large sheet of white light burst out from the spirit-breeding ring on his chest, enveloping the single-horned Qilin and slowly dragging it into the ring. Sending a thread of divine will into the ring, Wu Qi cried out coldly, Long Yuan, take good care of him and make him behave. I still owe him a mount. Heal him if he is obedient. Beat him to death if he is not obedient. Long Yuan's muffled roar could be vaguely heard, followed by the miserable howl of the single-horned Qilin. After deactivating the spirit-breeding ring, Wu Qi looked at those heaven immortals, whose faces had turned pale, and said with a cold grin, All of you have taken a fancy to my magical treasures? At the moment, 21 pitch-black wolf heads were wheeling around Wu Qi at high speed, while the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag above his head was emanating a large sheet of gray smoke and evil aura. Strange, shrill howls were deafening, making one's ears hurt and unable to stand steadily. All of a sudden, a plume of dark smoke rushed out from under Wu Qi's feet, and a beam of dark light shot up into the sky from the top of his head. His fake nascent soul, which cultivated the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture, flew out of his body, roaring and releasing a dense fiend aura that blanketed the entire Qing Su immortal square in just a blink of an eye. Damn it, a fiend cultivator! The faces of those heaven immortals, who were struggling bitterly under the frightening power of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, fell instantly. Wu Qi had brazenly killed 20,000 captains and generals of the human race, as well as Feng Qingya, the general who guarded Qing Su immortal pass of Yu dynasty. He was decisive and ruthless, and now he had revealed his nascent fiend. All the heaven immortals firmly believed that Wu Qi was indeed a cultivator from the Fiend League. As a fiend immortal who dared to openly attack a general of Yu dynasty like Wu Qi, it was obvious that he had a very strong backer. These heaven immortals were filled with regret. Why did they provoke such a fiend cultivator? It was fine if they joined hands to rob and bully ordinary heaven immortals and cultivators, but it was definitely not a good idea to get entangled with a fiend immortal who was famous for seeking revenge for the smallest grievance. Laughing bitterly, the bearded Taoist who had interrupted Wu Qi's teleportation with an immortal talisman just now roared, "Fellow Taoist, we are in the wrong today. Please don't take it to heart, fellow Taoist. The culprit, Feng Qingya, is already dead. Why do you still want to make things difficult for us? Why don't we just let this matter go, and we'll keep our mouths shut and never reveal your background?" Wu Qi gave a cold snort. A few vague fiend shadows could be vaguely seen around him. He flew towards those heaven immortals and cried out harshly, "How can you let me off so easily? You guys beat me and kill me as you please, and then leave as soon as you're done. Where's the face of this immortal?" With a cold snort, Wu Qi said proudly, "Cut the crap. Each of you, give me 1 immortal item, 3 spirit items, 9 magical treasures, 1 million lower-grade energy stones, and 10 million gold, silver, and jewelry. Then Lao Tzu will let you go." So, Qing Su Immortal Pass was an unreasonable place? Since that was the case, Wu Qi did not plan to reason with these people. Do you like to say that the one with the bigger fist is always right? Well, since Wu Qi's fist is the strongest right now, you better hand over your money and buy your lives. Looking at the bearded Taoist, Wu Qi smiled and nodded. Then, he suddenly opened his mouth and shot out a stream of flame that looked like a shooting star. Attached with all the innate fire energy in Wu Qi's body, the acquired fire spirit pearl shot out like a small sun and smashed right into the Taoist's chest. A loud boom rang out, and a heat wave rolled and rocked. The Taoist's defensive immortal item was smashed to pieces, and half of his body was burned to ashes by the heat wave. Seeing this, Chi-Chi's expression flickered. 60% of them spun and fled into the distance in beams of light, while the remaining 40% attacked together with Chi-Chi. Dozens of flying swords and magical treasures came smashing down towards Wu Qi's head at the same time. Chapter 455. Kill. Wu Qi let out a long cry as he waved the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag with all his might. A shrill, unpleasant ghost howl towered into the sky. The dozens of immortal swords and magical treasures that were about to reach Wu Qi's head suddenly froze and dimmed, while their power was weakened by at least 30%. Countless golden dragon scales shot out of Wu Qi's left hand, transforming into a huge golden light screen that shielded Wu Qi. The dozens of immortal items kept falling down and smashing against the golden dragon scales, sending sparks flying in all directions. But no matter how hard they tried, they could not break the protection of the dragon scales. The quality of the scales left behind by the 25th tier snow-armored heaven-devouring python when it transcended its heavenly tribulation was comparable to a 25th tier immortal item. Among all the heaven immortals present, the strongest one was only a 33rd tier cultivator, and the strongest immortal item was only a 29th tier immortal item. So, how could they possibly break the incredible defense of the earth element dragon scale shield? Wu Qi laughed wildly as he bit his tongue, causing a large chunk of flesh to fall off the tip of his tongue. He coughed out mouthfuls of blood essence, which splashed onto the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag and made the countless jade skulls on the flag grit their teeth and scream. An immense evil aura blanketed the entire Qing Su Immortal Square. Wu Qi's nascent fiend performed a reverse lotus incantation gesture, unleashing a great sheet of fiend flame that swept out in all directions together with the frightening cries of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. The bodies of those fleeing heaven immortals swayed as their immortal items exploded, and they fell to the ground at the same time. The spirit-restricting rope shot out like a great python, wrapping around the fallen heaven immortals and dragging them back. Some heaven immortals still had the strength to fight back. They had already landed on the ground, but still unleashed their immortal items to defend against the purple light beam. Wu Qi sneered as his erect eye suddenly opened. The pupil transformed from the cold electric mirror shot out a large sheet of silver-purple thunderbolts, which streaked across the sky soundlessly like a storm that covered 1,000 miles. All the raindrops gathered on one man, and the continuous and dense thunderbolts gave those heaven immortals a great pain. Blinding flashes kept bursting from their defensive immortal items, and in just a blink of an eye, the defensive immortal outfits of a few heaven immortals were broken. When the lightning struck the bodies of those heaven immortals, their flesh and blood flew everywhere, and their immortal souls nearly burst out of their bodies. With an ear-piercing whistle, the spirit-restricting rope bound these heaven immortals tightly and dragged them to Wu Qi's side, where he threw them into the spirit-breeding ring one by one. Kill! Wu Qi once again let out a resounding battle cry. The acquired earth, water, wood, and gold spirit pearls turned into 4 beams of intense light and shot out. Together with the fire spirit pearl that was shot out earlier, they turned into 5 beams of intense light that shot out in all directions. The heaven immortal, who was the first to bid for Wu Qi's defensive spirit item, the green cicada wings, cried out in shock. 5 acquired spirit pearls had locked onto his body at the same time, making him the first target of the fusion of 5 elements. The heaven immortal performed an incantation gesture with both hands and was about to unleash a life-saving spell. But the 5 acquired spirit pearls did not give him any chance to do so. Like a mighty thunderbolt, they smashed viciously onto his body, shattering his defensive immortal item and turning his body into countless pieces of flesh and blood. A golden immortal soul soared up into the sky, about to flee. Wu Qi gave a cold snort and made a grabbing gesture with his left hand. A huge hand shrouded in dark smoke and dark fiend flame appeared out of nowhere, grabbing the immortal soul. Wu Qi laughed hideously. A large sheet of dark fiend gleam rose from the palm formed from a thread of his nascent divinity mixed with a great amount of inferno hell fiend energy, forcibly refining the immortal soul into numerous soul crystals. To Wu Qi's surprise, the soul crystals concocted with the soul-seizing technique found in the Inferno Hellfiend scripture contained a much stronger soul energy than those concocted with the divine flame of order, and they also contained a part of the great Tao of heaven and earth comprehended by that heaven immortal. Wu Qi laughed delightedly and said, "It is indeed a good technique. Hee. How many energy stones is this soul crystal worth?" With a fiend gleam flashing in his eyes, Wu Qi snorted ferociously at the remaining heaven immortals. The heaven immortals saw Wu Qi was protected by the earth element dragon scale shield, which several dozens of immortal swords and items could not break through his defense, and the mighty power of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, which nearly knocked them to the ground with just a wave. He also had the spirit-restricting rope, sword of greedy wolf, and many other powerful magical treasures. On top of that, his cultivation base was extremely strange. Although he was only a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator, he actually had the power to fight against a heaven immortal. Who would dare to provoke such a strange character? Who would be willing to do so? With a loud cry, the heaven immortals staggered and fled for their lives. When the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag was waved with all its might, not only were their immortal item spirits shaken, even their own immortal souls were badly shaken. If not because Wu Qi had focused most of his power on those heaven immortals who had fled far away, these heaven immortals would have been captured alive by Wu Qi. Seeing that they were about to flee, Wu Qi grinned hideously, quickly fished out a few spirit pills to replenish his energy, and swallowed them. When his energy was slightly restored, he raised the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag and waved it with all his might. The Earth Element Dragon Scale shield produced a shrill whistling noise as 36,000 golden scales shot out along with ear-splitting whistling noises. Each of the fleeing heaven immortals was hit by several thousand golden scales. With a tremendous force, the countless golden scales smashed onto the bodies of those heaven immortals, causing them to tremble violently and lose their footing, making it impossible for them to maintain a stable path of escape. All the offensive magical treasures carried by Wu Qi had been unleashed. Apart from a few powerful items that he could not use, all the other magical treasures, whether they were spirit items or immortal items, transformed into colorful beams and shot out. Miserable howls rang out from all directions. One after another, these heaven immortals had their defensive immortal energy broken, and their immortal energies sealed by the spirit-restricting rope. Then, they were dragged back in a sorry state by Wu Qi. The rules of Qing Su Immortal Pass? When these fleeing heaven immortals were brought back, Wu Qi gave them a round of brutal stomps on their faces. As long as your fist is big and tough enough, you can do whatever you want in Qingsu Immortal Pass, am I right? Am I right? You are all heaven immortals with strong cultivation bases, so you can do whatever you want? Am I right? Brutally, he ripped off all the storage rings, bracelets, and belts from these heaven immortals. 2 female heaven immortals even had a pair of extremely rare anklets of storage. Although there were not many items in these anklets of storage, every single one of them was of the finest quality. There were over 230 immortal stones in them, which was really out of Wu Qi's expectation. Laughing wildly, Wu Qi put away all the spoils of war. Then he neatly extracted the immortal souls of these heaven immortals and refined them into blood and soul crystals. Just like what he did just now, the quality of the blood and soul crystals refined with Inferno Hellfiend Flame was a few times better than those refined with Divine Flame of Order. After all, the Divine Flame of Order was a righteous innate divine flame, and it did not have a very strong effect when it came to killing and plundering. On the other hand, the Inferno Hellfiend scripture, as its name suggested, was not a good technique. It was very easy to kill people and seize their energy, essence, and soul, and it was the job of the Inferno Hellfiend scripture. After ransacking all the heaven immortals who were taken into the spirit breeding ring just now, he chose the one with the highest cultivation base and possessed him with a celestial fiend puppet. After robbing his memories, Wu Qi refined all the heaven immortals into blood and soul crystals. Among the storage magical treasures of these heaven immortals, Wu Qi found the maps of over 300 provinces of Diyu Dynasty, some of which were marked with various symbols, such as what kind of special products could be found in each province, and which officials were easier to get along with. Wu Qi could not help but feel overjoyed. If he were to collect all the maps of over 300 provinces by himself, how much effort would it take? The immortals and cultivators in Qingsu Immortal Square came from all over the place. It seemed like Qingsu Immortal Pass only covered over 300 provinces. He tidied up all the items and shoved them into the Black Dragon Spirit Ring, then let it devour all the storage magical treasures, expanding its storage space once again. The Black Dragon item's spirit happily revealed his true form on the ring, sticking out his tongue at Wu Qi complacently, then flew back into the ring and began to digest today's harvest comfortably. Wu Qi laughed hideously, throwing his head back and saying, "So, this is the rule of Qingsu Immortal Pass? The one with the biggest fist is the boss." The erect eye on his forehead opened, shooting out several hundred thunderbolts that turned several hundred lofty mountains around Qingsu Immortal Square into ashes. Wu Qi threw his head back and cried out sternly, "Now listen up, everyone in Qingsu Immortal Square. I've killed Feng Qingya and several dozens of heaven immortals, so I don't mind killing a few more. If you want to live, hand over all your money and belongings." Ha! Laughing wildly, Wu Qi exercised the heavenly law's embodiment divine ability of the heavenly dragon transformation, growing his body to 100 feet tall. 2 streams of white smoke sprayed out of his nostrils as he extended both hands and grabbed towards Qingsu Immortal Square, which stretched for nearly 100 miles. A deafening rumble rang out as all the roof tiles of several tens of thousands of houses and buildings in Qingsu Immortal Square were lifted up into the sky, while some houses that were not as sturdy were directly lifted up into the sky, revealing countless cultivators and mortals who were dumbstruck. When Wu Qi exercised the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag just now, he had carefully avoided any impact on the ground. Therefore, apart from some unlucky fellows, the rest of the people in Qingsu Immortal Square were safe and sound. They were just stunned by Wu Qi's massacre just now. The surrounding lofty mountains were destroyed, and the rocks and dust from the collapsed mountains were slowly falling from the sky. Only when the rocks and dust hit the heads of those cultivators and mortals did they wake up. Countless cultivators and mortals dropped to their knees and bowed deeply to Wu Qi before Qi. "Please spare our lives, Master Immortal. We are willing to offer you all our belongings, as long as you spare our lives, Immortal Master." Wu Qi grinned coldly. All the shops in Qingsu Immortal Pass were backed by some immortal sect or formidable immortals. Since the rule of Qingsu Immortal Pass was based on violence, Wuqi did not mind giving them an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Since you like robbing, I'll let you taste the feeling of being robbed together. With a cold snort, Wuqi spread his divine will in all directions, enveloping the entire Qingsu Immortal Pass. He shouted coldly, "Since that's the case, quickly hand over all your good stuff. Quick, quick, quick. Whoever dares to be negligent will be struck by my heavenly thunder." The erect eye on his forehead opened and shot out another lightning bolt. This time, Wuqi blew a tower in the center of Qingsu Immortal Square to pieces. Countless sword beams soared into the sky from all directions of the immortal market, as the shopkeepers of various shops walked toward Wuqi with their hands full of storage treasures, their faces ashen and trembling. Reverently, they presented the storage treasures to Wuqi, then quickly left on their flying swords. Enveloped by Wuqi's divine will, he knew every movement of all these people. Therefore, he was not afraid that these people would try to hide some treasures for themselves. He looted everything in the immortal square to his heart's content, and his wealth was increasing at a frightening rate. All of a sudden, a beam of Buddhist light came flying over from a far distance. "Merciful Buddha! Amitabha! Fellow immortal, there is a fate between you and the Buddhist League." From a great distance, a deep and dignified voice could be heard coming from the Buddhist light. "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.